What would you do if you were transported to another world? You'd be happy to have a second chance, right? So imagine that this really happened. In that case, choosing to stream as a hobby isn't recommended, and you'll find out why in this story. In the Rogius Kingdom, which is a school, the students say goodbye to the teacher. Sometime later in the student's dormitory, the protagonist feels relieved to finally be home. Taking off his uniform and putting on a bandana, he says it's time, and goes straight to his computer to start his other training. Opening the live stream, he greets everyone and asks how everyone's day went. Then he thanks everyone for being online and commenting. At that moment, he begins reading the chat to see what everyone is saying. He starts the Chat's Late and Chat Advice segments. He reads a story from someone named Akuta, who is a rank B adventurer. He mentions that one day a mage joined his team, but he was terrible and could only use support magic to find enemies. So of course he was kicked out. Akuta says it was satisfying to see him cry, and reading this, the protagonist thinks he's stupid, because that support mage also fixed weapons, which would save a lot in workshop fees. At that moment, someone in the chat asks what Akuta or the streamer thinks about it, pointing out that he speaks as if he's above everyone. Explaining, the streamer says that if he ends up in trouble during adventures, he won't have any support magic. And that doesn't matter if he's a god or a king. This is just a piece of advice. He concludes that if he doesn't have good judgment, he should just step down so everyone doesn't die. Also, he should get on his knees and beg the person to return to his team. Afterward, he thinks he's not sure if he got the right message across, but he prefers that the guy doesn't die early, so he moves on to the next story. The person in the next story mentions he's from a high-class family and is now engaged. However, he's fallen for a beautiful transfer student and is considering choosing her. This makes the streamer quite irritated, saying she'll end up marrying him. At that moment, the follower in question listens to what he says. Everyone starts laughing a lot as the protagonist asks if he's even thought about his family, calling him a monster, and he says that's not a topic to take too lightly. He tells him he should work to earn his fiancée's trust first and not choose people just based on appearance. Then he asks if he knows how lucky he is. Admitting, he says he'd also love to have a girlfriend and calls him an idiot. Wrapping up, he says he'll leave things at that and end the program, and he'll see everyone tomorrow. After ending the program, he wonders if this is what streamers felt like in their previous lives. The protagonist, who is a streamer, is named Canada and is a transfer student. Then the day goes by. A teacher teaches the students that magic is about using their own imagination. Lost in thought, the boy recalls that he's been living in this world for a long time, and that since he reincarnated here, he got very excited when he discovered the existence of magic. But now it's nothing special. Besides, there's something much more important. It turns out he has unlimited power. In this case, Canada realized very quickly that this power would affect his daily life. So he took a magic classification exam, got rank S, and thus enrolled in the Royal Academy. And the star he received is reserved only for the wealthiest and most powerful nobles. At that moment, someone appears and he looks back. A man congratulates him and calls him a commoner, and another says he's not welcome here because he doesn't belong to any family. In his mind, the boy understands that nobles don't seem to like people from lower society, and that no matter how hard he tries, he won't be able to change his social status. Hearing all this, he decides just to endure it and be polite for now. Smiling, he questions how he would know that and says it would be better to ask the professor to know which family he belongs to. Seeing this response, everyone gets very irritated. Grabbing him by the shirt, the bully asks what he just said, and the teacher calls out to both of them. At that moment, a girl intervenes, apologizing for being late, and then the bully releases the boy. She seems quite out of breath and tired. This girl, apparently shy, is named Maria Atarachiko. Seeing her, the teacher comments that she was probably busy helping at home and tells her not to worry, which makes the girl grateful. He then suggests that she introduce herself to everyone today. However, someone intervenes, saying no. Walking in her direction, he says he'll handle it. Looking at the protagonist, he remarks that both of them achieve an S rank, which is strange. Casting a spell, he asks if he just has to throw it directly at the target, and the teacher confirms, telling him to do his best. Demonstrating a lot of magical control, he throws the fire toward the target with ease, and he hits it perfectly, which impresses everyone. Seeing this display of power, the teacher comments that they can allow one more person. Reading from his book, he says that today it's Canada's turn. At that moment, the boy prepares while the bullies start laughing. He casts his fire magic, but it seems to hit far from the main target point. However, it ends up so powerful that it completely destroys it. He thinks he fired and it was over too quickly, so everyone is shocked and in awe. Smiling, the man says his power was splendid, what they just witnessed, and holds the remains of the target in his hands. He tells the students that it's now time for individual training, and everyone's motivation drops to zero at this moment. After seeing this incredible demonstration of power, a bully becomes very angry, saying he's just a commoner and that this is impossible. He claims that Canada is obviously deceiving everyone, but Maria draws their attention, questioning what they're doing. The two boys are surprised, and seeing her nervous expression, they both become very afraid. She comments that this has nothing to do with social status and that they don't know anything about this person. Flicking a tree, she says that people like him have unimaginable power, and that's why he passed the exam. The flick is so powerful that it breaks the tree in half, so the girl will suggest they stop letting their foolish pride get in the way of others. Embarrassed, the boys say, "Yes, Your Highness." Walking toward him, she catches the boy's attention. She tells him that his magic was incredible and that she's impressed, so the boy thanks her. In his mind, he recognizes Maria and realizes she's from the royal family and also the youngest of the 3 princesses. And he also begs for this to end quickly since everyone is watching them. Changing the subject, Maria then says he must be wondering why conflicts keep arising across social classes. She states that he should listen to what the Lord has to say about this. The boy asks if she said something, and she replies that she didn't. Turning around, she comments that he shouldn't provoke people, even if he's angry. However, the protagonist thinks it was them who started it. Meanwhile, that stuck-up kid listens to the conversation in secret. Back at home, he's streaming again and asks the chat if anyone has problems at work or school. He remembers when this used to be a work terminal he got after writing in school and that he had to do a lot to upgrade the terminal to a PC. Because even this world has a network that connects terminals, but most people didn't have access to technology or entertainment until now. So Canada used his unlimited power to create something quite similar to a streaming site. And if others try to stream, they'll end up running out of power in minutes. At that moment, he mentions that something horrible happened today, that nobles seem to be getting into another argument, and these fights over status seem endless, and that it would be great if everyone could get along. Additionally, his chat mentions that everyone seems divided on this matter. Suddenly, something catches his attention, a colorful message. He realizes it counts as a donation and wonders what this is. It's from Princess Anonymous, who says she's very happy to hear the streamer's voice today and, as usual, is sending her letter of gratitude. After that, she transfers 10 gold coins to the streamer. Very happy, he thanks the princess. However, he realizes what she said, that she sent something yesterday too, and only now understands that last time 10 coins equaled 100,000 yen. Seeing this money, the boy asks if she's not stealing money from her parents. Responding, the girl says there's no need to worry, and that all the money comes from her own pocket. She also says she wouldn't mind offering herself as a lover to the streamer, but then changes her mind saying to forget it. The protagonist then realizes that it's probably just a guy pretending to be a girl anyway, and he doesn't care. Thanking the streamer, he says that if they ever meet, there's no reason not to give it a try. The girl says she can't allow herself to fall for him, but simply can't avoid it. She begins hugging her phone, deeply in love, turning side to side like a teenager. She comments that he's truly unusual, appearing out of nowhere like a comet, captivating people with his charisma and influencing them in an instant. Moreover, he's helped many through kind words and guidance. With his objective opinion and courage to face anything and anyone, she believes he can overcome everything, diving in headfirst and emerging victorious in the end. Listening to the live, she says it feels good that his voice has embedded itself in her mind and every inch of her body has been marked by him. She declares that she doesn't just want to support him financially, but rather to devote herself entirely to this person. With a maniacal expression, she says she wants to live for him. As previously mentioned, the streamer has gathered a large group of followers in the city, and outside, more people with similar terrifying feelings have continued to appear. However, Canada's true identity, the streamer, remains completely unknown to the Catalyst. This will lead him to encounter these fans, resulting in a major incident. This is a world where Canada was reincarnated, and he is hiding his unlimited magical power. So he continues with his activity as the world's only streamer, even while facing harsh treatment at his school. He ends up receiving another 10 gold coins. He stares at his phone, feeling terrified, and she declares that he's her source of life. Walking through the school, he says that taking a quieter route home with fewer people around will be better. And since that Target incident, it's been a hassle to find peace anywhere. Smiling, he thinks streaming tonight will brighten his mood. At that moment, he turns a corner and sees someone confessing to Maria, saying he loves her. In response, she says she feels there's already someone destined to have her heart. Furthermore, the boy realizes nervously that it's the guy from before. Someone asks if he's the promised suitor since she's the 3rd princess. She says it's not that and that she can now find her own love. However, there's already someone she wants to save herself for. The boy begins to cry, running off saying he hopes they'll be happy. Analyzing the situation, the protagonist thinks Maria would definitely be his type of woman. He thinks this suitor is lucky and wonders what good deed he did to win her over. Noticing the boy's presence, she says he's listening to other people's conversations and is just the lowest person here. Afraid his shadow is visible and feeling worried, the boy apologizes, saying he was just on his way home. But she laughs, saying not to worry, as it's just a joke. At that, he thanks her and leaves quickly, and she thinks he was very fast. Maria feels curious, realizing she recognizes that accent from somewhere, but maybe it's just her imagination. Sometime later in the student's dormitory, the boy is streaming again, and she's excited, saying she was waiting for him. She says she loves him very much, mentioning that her ears are always happy. Someone then donates money, and the boy says he's glad for the donations, but that they should think about themselves first. Seeing this, Maria declares that she's the one providing money for the streamer, so she must focus on him. The boy reads the first message about demons being a race that must be eliminated and are beings of common knowledge. He says he doesn't understand and asks if living together in peace is really so bad. And he mentions he hasn't met any demons, but there are good ones among them too, and even among humans there must be some like that. And that there are enough bandits among those who talk about the wildness of demons too, like with the discrimination slave you hear about so often. The girl thinks that back then she also said something like that. In the carriage, Maria tells Sebas to stop here. As she steps down from the carriage, she's shocked by what she sees. Looking at several humans always treated as slaves and animals always in cages. The man then comments that this is a slave market, and she questions if slavery is a thing of the past. Nervously, her subordinate suggests they go somewhere else. The girl thinks there's nothing they can do about it. The man responds that even now, there seem to be nobles from the ministry involved behind closed doors, making it very difficult to change the law. Maria questions what they can do, and the man responds that he doesn't know either. However, according to what he's heard, there is someone who can give advice to those who have lost their way. Taking out her phone, she realizes it's the streamer. He says that if she truly exists in this world, she should try asking him, and it might be a salvation option for everyone. Curious, she wonders if there's indeed someone who could find a solution to this problem. Then she sends a message saying she wants to abolish the slave market. The guard is surprised that slavery still exists in the country and asks if she knows that slaves are still living people. He tells her that with her social status, it would be possible to change the law, and if she's really a princess, she should try. He continues, saying that many lives could be saved if she took a stand, and he's hopeful for these changes. Hearing this, she stands up and asks Sebas to prepare the carriage. She states that they're going to the king, who is her father. Maria led the country into a revolutionary movement, and as a result, slavery was eradicated. Maria says she will continue to believe in him and that he has shown the way to righteousness, and she will keep following it. She sees discrimination as a detriment to peace. Looking at the sky, she says she will stay as the mediator between the founders and nobles of the academy. Changing focus, she receives a message. Seeing the chat, she notices a debate about who would be the best match for the streamer. Very irritated, she declares that she believes in the rules. Making multiple donations, she states that she's the most suitable to be with the streamer. Seeing these donations, the boy is shocked, saying he's not a fan of disruptive listeners, so he asks if everything's okay. He states that he doesn't like people arguing in a place where everyone is watching. Upon hearing this, the girl bursts into tears, crying, saying the streamer hates her. But he says he'll forgive her if she understands the warning, so they'll get along. Bowing, the girl declares that although she may be immature, she'll do her best. Then the boy says they'll get along, mentioning that demons are also very important. Smiling, he talks about imagining what the Demon King is like and wonders how he is. Hearing this, everyone is shocked, including the crazed girl. At that moment, everyone tells him for everything's sacred, never to speak on that topic again. Reflectively, the boy says he wonders if he'll ever see a world where humans and demons can live together in peace. Seeing a message, someone says he's really interesting and will start thinking more about the future too. Still, Canada remains unaware that he's touched on a taboo in this world. Going back a bit in time before Canada's controversies and statements, Alona declares that she's sick of it and will kill everyone without holding back. Upon hearing this, everyone present begins to tremble in fear. The girl at the warp portal says there's no way they can fight against this, because humans would classify it as an SS-class threat. Then they question why they must fight for endless centuries, and if it's truly the right choice for them. The demon woman walks through the hall while the guards comment on her strength and beauty. In her mind, she wonders where everyone's common sense has gone until now. At that moment, someone calls her by her name, Shruza. The girl says the previous adventurers brought something quite interesting. She hands over a phone and Shruza asks what streamer means in their world. She explains that people use it to listen to him and that he's very popular among humans. However, unfortunately, where they are now, there's no signal it seems. Observing the device, the demon princess says she'll look into it, as it might be useful for gathering information. Quickly, she orders her subordinate to do something to provide a signal for the device immediately. Sometime later, she's in her office on the computer, already connected. The woman says at least it will help pass the time, and her subordinate rushes out, saying she'll let everyone know. Suddenly, a notification sound starts ringing on the computer. A few days later, she's avidly following the streamer. She commented in the chat, making everyone wonder why she did that, as it's not like he could respond. She was just killing time, but once she realized that this entertainment or calm had become part of her daily routine, she began to wonder what the streamer really was, noting that he had enough magical power to project his voice in all directions. In other words, he's a human with more mana than her, which is very interesting. Sipping her tea, she thinks he's truly fascinating. However, when he starts questioning why humans and demons fight each other, she's shocked, dropping her cup. She wonders if he holds the same opinion as her or not. The boy continues, saying that if only they didn't focus on fighting and could have the leaders start negotiations among themselves. Then he adds that this is just his opinion and nothing more. Changing the subject, he wonders what he should have for dinner. Laughing, the demon says he's an idiot. From that moment, she began to see him as a companion. Now in the present day, she's donating money, saying that it's good for him and that she'll be his personal wallet. behaving like a crazy yandere, much like the other princess. She says these moments make her much happier. At that moment, the protagonist starts talking about slavery and discrimination. Hearing the notification, she realizes that the anonymous princess donated again. Her secretary asks if something is wrong, and the princess confirms. She says that this little human will pay. At this point, he wonders what the Demon King is like and says he'd like to know exactly what he's like. Impressed, the demon wonders if he wants to see her. She quickly goes to the keyboard to type, commenting that he's truly interesting and that she'll start thinking more about the future too. Impressed, he asks if she's pretending to be the Demon King now and says he'd love to meet her. The Demon Queen says there's something more important now and that she needs to take care of an urgent matter. Sometime later, she's taking a bath. She thinks of the streamer, a mere child who can do as he wishes with humanity. She reflects that the Demon Queen has been in existence for many, many years. However, she claims she'd be happy if he completely dominated her body and would let him do a few things. Interrupting her bath, the secretary says it's time for her departure. In shock, she asks if the woman got dizzy, and the demon responds that the water is just a bit hot. In her mind, she declares that she wants to meet the streamer and wonders how she should make that desire come true and what she must do to see his face. She wants to touch him with her hands and hold him in her arms. She declares that the human realm is where he resides and she's willing to offer everything she has as the Demon Queen. Then she opens a portal. Jumping toward it, she wonders if he'll also grant everything she desires. A little later, the portal appears behind an old man, startling him. Smiling, the demoness says she'll start making preparations. Sometime later, the protagonist gets up and says it's a bit noisy, and then one of the men mentions the recent news and updates. Then the demons send a new request for a ceasefire. In a city near the castle, people are amazed because the streamer just talked about it, and they wonder if the Demon King was listening. So in places Canada doesn't know, he's gaining even more fame than before, but the boy is oblivious and thinks they're having a festival. Back in his room, he says he's finally finished. Tired, he says he'll talk about it later, that he's fine, but he's hungry and should go eat. Sometime later in the city center, he thinks that spending days off like this isn't so bad sometimes. He's happy while eating, saying it's very tasty. However, a man yells, asking the lady what big idea she had to spill sauce on people's clothes like that. Irritated, he tells her to watch where she's going and demands some form of compensation. Another person in the background says he's the one who bumped into her and that it's just a scam. Annoyed, the protagonist realizes there are no soldiers around and wonders if the world wants him to do something. He thinks it's a headache, but doing nothing would be even worse. So he decides to call the bully an old man. He states that all she did was bump into him and questions if she ran fast enough to break a few bones or something like that. The bully responds, asking what he wants. Then, addressing the situation, the boy asks if he minds leaving him alone and calls him a fossil. Quickly, he grabs the man's hand, squeezing it, which leaves the man surprised, thinking his arms feel like several, and then questions how he managed to do that. Fleeing, the man says he just remembered he has work and can't be late. Annoyed, the boy mutters that he could at least apologize. Then he asks the young girl if something's wrong. Taking off her hood, she simply says that his voice sounded familiar, and only the protagonist wonders if she might be a listener. He thinks that if she found out, maybe he could start a romance with a cute girl, but it seems more like a misunderstanding. He then tells her the most important thing is for her to get home before something like this happens again. The girl replies that she could have handled it herself but could have ended up seriously hurting him. Surprised, the protagonist asks if she's one of those people. The girl appreciates his kindness and thanks him. Kanata says it's no big deal that helping a pretty girl like her actually brightens his mood. Embarrassed, the girl says she thinks there are plenty of people prettier than herself. And only the boy understands that, no, if that's the case, then the bar is very high. At that moment, the girl notices something, asking what happened to the boy's hand. He thinks about how he managed to clean everything up yesterday, that it's a bit hurt, but will probably be fine by tomorrow. The girl gently tells him to be careful. Going with his instincts, he tells her she's a kind person. In shock, the boy realizes he might have overstepped. Curious, she asks if he thought she was much younger. She says she turned 17 last month, so he apologizes as he's the same age. The girl tells him not to apologize since she's used to it. However, leaning in, she comments that her body grew quite well. Seeing this, the boy is completely startled. Smiling, the girl apologizes, saying that unintentionally doing things like that can be offensive. Bowing, she says goodbye and mentions they might meet again someday, and they part ways. Thoughtful as he walks away, he wonders about her cross, if she's a sister in training or something like that. But no matter what he really thinks. Sometime later at night, in a chapel, standing before a woman, the girl says she's returned. Welcoming her, the woman calls her sister and says that's what she'd like to say. However, she's heard that the girl was involved in an attempted fraud, and it's depressing news to hear. Only a few know about her identity within such a large platform, so this shouldn't have happened. It starts becoming painful since she's replaceable for the kingdom and sometimes a key figure in negotiations with other countries. The girl says that all monsters are the same and that she must despise sin within a person. The woman reprimanding her says that's very merciful of her. Inside the chapel, she remarks there was a good meeting amidst the bad and that he was like a knight from fairy tales, and she feels their voices sound really similar. At this moment, she picks up her device. Thinking no one's around, she decides to join the streamers live. She begins to go a bit crazy like a yandeer, hearing the boy's divine voice. In fact, even this girl, who calls herself a saint, is also one of his listeners. And besides her own insanity, she also enjoys hearing his voice. Walking away, the woman with long hair comments that the saint is very composed and truly amazing. Inside the chapel, the girl declares that he has a lovely voice. She says that every day she purifies her body for him, just hoping that he'll be ready to give her everything she desires at any moment, and that his voice makes her lower abdomen almost scream in delight. Acting in a very concerning way, she states she'll get pregnant just from hearing his voice. At this moment, the boy says that before reading the letters, he's going to show something. Getting closer to her device, the girl becomes very curious. Canada asks if he can show his hands and then displays them, showing they're injured. This piques the girl's curiosity, but it can't be, and there's no way this is possible. Realizing this might be that boy, she wonders if it's really him, as he exposed himself without knowing. The streamer asks his listeners if they can see his hand. He says they can see his hands because it's a magical item that finished earlier this morning. He explains he's checking on his injury, and it's looking good. The bruise in question hasn't gone away yet, so he needs to keep it bandaged. At that moment, he considers using gloves to keep his identity hidden. However, he thinks that's silly, as there's no way someone could identify him just by his hands. Meanwhile, the girl is completely stunned, shocked at the fact that those hands are indeed his. Then the demoness asks what happened to them. Many people in the chat are sending worried messages, explaining the boy says he went to a place earlier this morning and that everyone should be careful with things on high shelves. Anyway, today is the debut, and he plans to use this while he'll have to present something. Reading the chat, he asks if just seeing his hands really annoyed them. Changing the subject, he says he'll read their letters now. 2 hours pass, and he says it's fun today. They're so energetic, so he moves on to the next one. However, upon reading, he realizes it's not a normal letter, but a threat. The man says he's the leader of the Thieves Guild, and as he sees it, he has no idea what the streamer's motives are, but he's extremely dumb and irritating. He says people like the streamer make his skin crawl. He declares they'll find him and kill him painfully. He ends by telling him to spend his last day trembling in bed and calls him a bastard. The boy thinks it's probably just envy and that he just hates his existence. He reflects that he earns money just by streaming and choosing his identity. The boy says he shouldn't threaten people like that as he could end up in prison, so he decides to move on to the next letter. Meanwhile, this man named Mantis is running. Looking back, he sees several knights and wonders why they're doing this to him. Many of his companions have been defeated. He wonders why he's fleeing with his tail between his legs and thinks it's all that bastard's fault. Suddenly, a leg appears above him. He looks to the side and realizes it's been cut in an instant. A man approaches, saying that he wouldn't notice something so weak and that mantises aren't a big deal. He questions if Mantis thinks he can cause all these problems. Then he steps closer and pierces Mantis' hand with a sword strike. Laughing with a twisted grin, the man tells him not to do that, as it'll only hurt more. Watching from a distance, a demon remarks that if he knew the mantises would end up here, he would be punished and prioritize survival. The bald man who issued the threat grows very worried, questioning who they are. The 3 women coordinating the attack say he'll be judged, and these 3 are his subordinates coming to judge him. The knight questions how he plans to kill him and for the gods' sake, remarks that there are hopeless people like him in this world. These people were also believers, though not as much as their superiors, yet still quite insane. Seeing it from Mantis' perspective, it was all for self-gain, and unfortunately for him, he only served as a typical example of the outcome in the online world. A few days later at school, everyone is talking about the Mantis case, the thief. Meanwhile, the protagonist wonders where to listen to or praise God. At this moment, the boy leaves his book on the ground. Noticing this, he tells his classmate that he dropped his book, but the classmate runs off, ignoring him. Reacting sadly, he thinks that recently, other students and even commoners have been ignoring him without reason. He realizes he really doesn't like this lonely student life and that maybe he went a bit too far. The teacher arrives in the room, greeting everyone and asking them to take their seats. Observing the protagonist, he wonders if the teacher looks a bit weary. The teacher says he's a bit regretful, but a certain person will be joining the class temporarily. Hearing this, all the students start cheering. However, he says they need to know one thing. She's someone of great importance to the capital and has a close relationship with the royal family. Her face has never been shown publicly. He concludes by saying that no one in the class should act rudely toward her and asks her to come in. This makes the protagonist very curious. The new student enters the room, introducing herself as Alfana and stating that despite her young age, she holds the position of saint in the local church. Upon seeing her, the boys in the class fall in love, and the protagonist is shocked to learn the transfer student is the saint. Several people are commenting about the transfer student being an S-class, and the boy finds it curious how fast the rumors are spreading. All the students in the class start flocking around her, eager to talk and make friends. He thinks to himself that he knew this would happen. One of the boys approaches, asking why she transferred to this academy. Responding, the girl says it's like a societal observation or something along those lines, and adds that she also has another objective in mind. At this, the protagonist recalls that he's read about these saints and realizes he needs to study more about this world. Every decade, someone with appropriate mana and personality is chosen as the true saint. And when utilized by the church, she also shines in diplomacy and even gets along well with the royal family. In other words, she's one of the most important people, and she's probably a friend of Princess Maria. Thinking it over, he understands that the person he encountered was a transfer student, and that putting her in the SS class was likely the best choice. He's relieved to remember that she forgave him for how he acted when they first met. But probably, in any case, she doesn't remember his face. An arrogant boy approaches, saying he's from the SS class and the next in line of the Long Door house. The girl stammers, saying it's a pleasure to meet him. He asks if she knew that Marie was absent today on official business, and the girl responds that she didn't. Then he compliments her, saying she's very beautiful and offering to show her around the school in place of the absent princess. Alfena smiles, saying she's grateful for the help but declines. Then the question arises of whether he could still call her by her name without that permission. The arrogant boy quickly apologizes, and the protagonist thinks this is what he deserves for acting so high and mighty. It's pathetic. Standing up from his desk, the boy thinks he should call her outside and that he doesn't have time to laugh. Outside, it's time for the new student to hit the target. She uses the water slash ability, which seems to be some type of magic. She swiftly manages to slice the target in half with great precision. The boys comment that this is to be expected from a saint. They say it's amazing that she might even be on a higher level than Princess Marie. The protagonist thinks that nobles are definitely challenging to deal with, and they can't just focus on themselves. At this point, the teacher says that Canada is next and asks him to go to the starting point. As he approaches the new student, she tells him to do his best. Hearing this, the boy becomes very curious, wondering if she noticed and that she told him to do his best. He clenches his fists. He thinks he never imagined that such a beautiful girl would say this to him, encouraging him to do his best, so he's happy. But unlike last time, he's not going to overdo it. He also uses the water slash ability toward the target. Smiling, his teacher says it was a fine shot. The others say he's very annoying and just a filthy peasant, questioning who he really is. The boy considers simply ignoring them all. At this, Alfena questions who they think they are to use words like peasant and filthy. She explains that when she heard it from Marie, she thought it was just a joke, but just thinking that nobles insult commoners is disgusting, and she wasn't aware of such attitudes at the academy. She comments that the magic just demonstrated was marvelous. Unlike brute force, it was refined and used with precision. She says it's incredible magic, and ignoring one's own weaknesses to belittle someone with real talent is despicable. She concludes by saying that an ability doesn't make them special, and they should learn a bit from the shame of their peers. At this moment, the protagonist thinks that seeing them being put in their place is quite satisfying. They're all hanging their heads, kneeling on the ground after hearing all that. They think they received a lecture from the princess and the saint solely because of this boy. Sometime later, he's having a snack, thinking he didn't get to speak with the saint in the end. But in any case, he has his headphones, so it's fine. He starts reflecting and rehearsing what he should say that evening when someone approaches. Noticing their presence, the boy turns around. The sight of the saint surprises him, and she mentions that it seems like he had a prior visitor. The protagonist is extremely surprised by her presence. The girl comments that she was going to explore the school grounds a bit, but ended up here. Approaching, she says she thought she'd find him again, calling him a kind gentleman. Looking at her, he asks if she was the girl who was planning to visit a town, which makes her pout. Irritated, she says he doesn't need to be so careful with her and should speak casually. The boy says he will speak normally, then realizes she's alone in this place and that it's not entirely bad news. Looking around, he notices there's no one else, so the girl approaches, taking his hand. She asks if she can call him Canada and requests that he call her Alfena, please. She asks if it's okay, mentioning that he didn't like being called by his name before, but she would really like him to call her that. She comments that they were lucky to meet again and asks him to grant her wish. Hesitant, the boy thinks about it, but after her insistence, he decides to call her by her name. Hearing her name from him, the girl becomes extremely emotional and shivers. He'd think she's a bit strange acting that way, but she's truly adorable. He wonders if she isn't too perfect. In her mind, the girl understands that being called by her name means he is basically agreeing to marry her. As they say, love is blind, and those obsessed with something can inflate even small things to fit their desires. Thus, everything seems normal to Canada, as it would be impossible to know that Alfena harbors unimaginable desires. The day passes, and back at school, heading to his class, he wonders where he should sit. He notices Alfena's presence at school as expected of her. Someone appears, saying they will be instructing them today. Upon seeing the person, one of the boys asks if this is a joke. It's Maria, and people wonder why she's not in S class, while she calls for Alfena. Walking toward the girl, she says it's been a while. Pinching her cheeks, she comments that Alfena is full of surprises, and Alfena apologizes. Seeing this, all the boys are in awe, saying the scene is so dazzling. The saint states that she just needed to know what student life was like. Entering this conversation, everyone in the class sees how divine they are and finds it hard not to be drawn to them. Canada thinks that the two are really used to being the center of attention, and that this seems normal for them. He wonders how they'd react if he tried talking to them, but it appears their expressions are fake, since the smile Alphanus showed yesterday and Princess Maria's warning were also fake, thinking it was all his imagination. However, he questions if he's overthinking it, as she was irritated by him in any case, and he feels a twinge of jealousy. Reflecting, he understands that this makes him feel very lonely. Looking back, he thinks he might be able to make a friend or two. Approaching the bully, he says hello and asks what he prepared for dinner, but the man responds very rudely. Feeling downcast, he feels defeated and realizes that everyone hates him. At that moment, he decides to take a nap. Seeing Maria's reaction, the saint asks if something is wrong, and the girl responds that it's nothing. Meanwhile, in the Zanhat Empire, in the mansion of a certain noble, many coins like a treasure are on top of a table. The man approaches and breaks the transmission device. He calls for Corvo, saying he has a mission for him. This is Corvo, a mysterious figure who accepts the mission given by the noble. Curious, Corvo asks who he will have to kill. The noble then responds, telling him to be patient and not rush things. Meanwhile, that device is still broadcasting the live stream. The next day, the protagonist is lying at his school desk, thinking about Corvo, because the two girls were talking about Corvo, and one of them says that apparently he appeared in Mithras the other day. She also mentions it's only 60 miles from here, and that they might also see Alphos. When the princess says they haven't done anything, so he probably won't come to them. Meanwhile, he thinks that, thank God, he was born into a clean family, because in this world, crows don't refer to the birds themselves. It's a nickname for assassins. Even with his listeners' information being so good, everyone thought it was just an urban legend, but apparently, it was real. He quickly goes back to sleep thinking it has nothing to do with him. Back at the castle, the Lord says that no one would think of this as he's a living legend here in the Empire. However, Corvo turns his back, saying he heard this conversation and demands to know the target, as, unlike the noble, his time is valuable. Upon hearing this response, the noble becomes very irritated. Then he starts cursing, but Corvo appears behind him. Startled, the man asks when he got there. Corvo then states he won't say it again, and the old man begins to speak. Extremely irritated, he states that the target is a streamer who controls the peasants with his words and even influences the laws of entire countries. He adds that because of him, this slavery business is losing money, as he only talks about human rights during his streams, and he's listened to by the entire royalty. Corvo then interrupts, saying he understands that this is the target. The noble explains there's no deadline for his job. As long as the target remains a coward who hides his identity, it will be difficult to locate him. He shows that this is a part of the payment, and the rest will be given once he completes the job. He then asks Corvo to trust him a bit and questions if he plans to take everything after the job. In response, Corvo says that's not it, and that the noble's request is something he can no longer bear. Approaching the man, he completely cuts him down. He states that the client is dead and that in this way he doesn't have to accept the job anymore, and thus he cannot take this money. The man then falls to the ground, lifeless. His maid arrives at the scene, asking if something happened, and upon seeing the man's body, she screams for help. Quickly, Corvo escapes from the place. He then reaches a spot in front of a giant clock resembling a big tower. Stretching, he says he's in pain and that this outfit is for work but is very uncomfortable, so he starts taking it off. He comments that it's a good thing they called an assassin like her. Removing a mask, she calls out to the Lord Streamer. Revealing herself as a girl, she says that real trash indeed exists in this world. At that moment, her device starts making noise and the live stream is beginning. Seeing this, she freaks out and starts paying attention. In this case, the legendary assassin turns out to be one of his listeners. The girl remarks that since she met the streamer, her nights have been very wonderful, and his voice is refreshing. She fantasizes about being punished by him for being a useless assassin who doesn't work at night. However, she realizes she's losing focus on the stream, so she decides to pay attention. At the streamer's house, he's doing his live and mentions that he should make some friends. But when he tries to, everyone tells him to shut up, so he asks to be consoled by his listeners. Holding the device, she says his voice is so adorable, and if she were the person he mentioned, she'd never think of hurting him. Seeing this, Maria gets annoyed, questioning who they think they are. The demoness comments that she's usually informed of this by the S group as soon as they arrive here, and the saint comments that she didn't know, so she'll do her best work at the next meeting. He says he's joking and asks if the situation was okay, mentioning he used a glass of water to create a crying sound. Reading the chat, he comments that it was quick and says he feels really bad for worrying everyone, then thanks them. Suddenly, someone asks how she intends to handle these fools, so she questions if they're talking about some form of punishment. This message was from the assassin. The man replies that instead of arguing, he wants to try to act in the friendliest way possible. He comments that even if they're not friends, they could have a conversation, and this response leaves the girl very charmed, saying he's cute. She asks him to tell her if one day they treat him worse than this, and the boy says he'll do his best and hopes everyone will console him. The assassin, standing by her PC, says that's what he desires. Unleashing several sword strikes until breaking the wall, she states she'll finish off anyone. Holding a skull, she asserts that no matter who they are, she promises to do it. Meanwhile, he's emotional, crying, thinking everything is so joyful because all his listeners are very kind people. Sometime later in the capital at an adult entertainment house, A woman thanks a man for his visit, and he says he'll see her later. She goes to her boss, who comments that she's been working hard and doesn't need to worry as he's changed the seats for her. The man thinks that all the clients were satisfied today as expected of the best girl. Smiling, the woman says that this worked and that of course they'll be happy because it's the best in the establishment. The woman then asks her boss to leave her alone for a moment. The man agrees, saying if he didn't have so much work, he'd love to hear his voice too. At that moment, she starts undressing. Peeking in, the man comments that she has red hair and blue eyes with a body and skin as white as snow and begins praising her. Noticing the compliments, she becomes irritated and throws a pillow at him, telling him to get out. Lying alone in bed, she comments to herself that today was very satisfying, all thanks to the streamer, and she thanks him, saying it's almost time. Suddenly, it starts playing and he goes live. At that exact moment, the girl goes completely wild, saying she's so happy. The streamer's voice reached places she wasn't even aware of. A princess, a demon queen, a saint, an assassin, and now this woman. The boy comments that a lot happened today and she wonders if he got into any trouble. She thinks that only the streamer was on her side, offering him her entire body and her deepest heart. She comments that he's everyone's savior, and after everything that happened, he saves people like her with his words. Kana was born in the kingdom's poorest slums and detached herself from her current life. However, to survive, she managed to rise above in the nightlife business. At a table with her friends, one of them comments that they're young now, but when they get old, they'll lose clients. Then another asks if they'll end up back in the slums. Kana responds, saying she doesn't even want to think about it. She comments that she met a pleasant person to work with. Here's when his worries didn't end, only in the very near future. Near their table, a boy comments to another that he's glad he realized it early and disengaged, since who could imagine she was a woman of the night. The social status of women in this type of work has always been low, and are treated as nothing more than spoiled goods. Later, her boss suggests they lift their spirits by tuning into the streamer's antics again, as it's still early. On the live, someone comments that's why girls don't like the streamer, which catches him by surprise, asking how he knew that. The women laugh, saying he's hilarious, and that he just gave himself away. Someone mentions that he's obsessed with cleanliness, but saw something that really disturbed him, surprising the streamer. The letter continues, saying it was from a woman of the night, filthy as men use her like a toy, and she is basically trash. Hearing this, Kana becomes very angry, wondering what the streamer thinks. They all begin to feel very sad, reflecting on their social position. Suddenly, the boy reacts to the letter, questioning what he's talking about and asking who he thinks he is to say such things. He questions why he would judge someone based on their profession, noting that many people enter this work because they have no choice. He then asks if they can stop using words against their jobs and that any job can save someone. Many people are being saved. He says he wants a world where people who work aren't humiliated but can feel pride. Kana becomes emotional seeing this because no one had ever said anything like that before. This sentiment spread through all the kingdom's videos, bringing tears of joy and reflection to most citizens. As a result, society's perception of women in this line of work shifted, and now they can live more easily. Kana comments that she's not sure about other countries, but at least in hers, the people's treatment of them is unmatched. Thanking the streamer, she mentions that one day she'll thank him in a different way. The boy comments in his live that he tried making friends by talking to people today, but the moment he opened his mouth, they told him to shut up. At that moment, his boss knocks on the door, apologizing for the interruption and starts talking about work. However, he notices that his maid is very upset that someone dared to speak about the Lord that way, insulting him. Everyone who adored the streamer felt the same rage, and the question was who exactly shared in the streamer's sadness, and this became an endless topic. A week then passes. The boy is walking down the streets starving and wonders if anyone is selling bread. At that moment, a woman appears above, asking if his name is Canada, and he's surprised to see it's Princess Maria. Whispering, he asks if it's safe for her to be alone out here. She responds, saying it's fine, although her butler is probably in a panic right now. As she leaves, the boy says goodbye, saying he'll see her at school, but she grabs his wrist. She then asks if he's free, nervous, and the boy replies yes, asking why. Maria suggests they take a walk together. Canada thinks he wants to go, but if anyone sees them together, his school life will be over. Undecided, he wonders what he should do now. The girl then hears something coming from a certain direction. Running while holding his hand, he asks her to wait. Suddenly, they arrive at the location. A noble is holding Kana forcefully, saying she can't act like that near a noble. The woman says she doesn't care about that and asks him to let her go. He then suggests to Maria that they take a break, and she agrees. Both approach the man, telling him to leave her alone, and they position themselves to confront him. The noble questions the man if he doesn't see that she doesn't want to go with him. Nervous, the man asks who these people are and tells them not to get in his way. At this moment, he notices Maria's presence. He then says to wait and remarks that the young lady is very beautiful. However, the man's hand abruptly reaches toward her. Irritated, the noble says he'll kill her right now. Placing his hand on the man's shoulder, he tells him to take it easy. Applying pressure on his shoulder, he throws the man to the ground. The noble then wonders what kind of magic this is as he can't move. Canada replies that it will wear off in a few minutes so he can calm down. Seeing this, Maria says Canada is as impressive as always. She then asks him to keep up the good work. The noble asks if he knows what's going to happen, as he's just an ordinary person. Kaneda replies that he doesn't care. At this moment, Kaneda asks who he is and if the person with the boy was the princess. He thinks to himself that she's indeed very beautiful. Nervous, he asks her if she's okay and if he did anything to her. Kaneda responds that she's fine and that he just tormented her to buy her. From the ground, the noble says that a child like him wouldn't understand, but explains that this woman is a filthy person of the night. He says he liked her, so he planned to take her, but she had the audacity to say no. Smiling, the protagonist asks what he thinks he's talking about. At that moment, he approaches the noble, questioning who he thinks he is to say such things, discriminating against a person because of their job. The boy continues speaking and Kanna becomes nervous, realizing that his words and the way he speaks are just like the streamers. Suddenly, a crowd begins gathering due to the noise. One of the civilians says there are people over there and the noble thinks he's actually caught the boy. On the ground, he declares that he's the noble who is explained to be a thief, and if they help him, they'll receive a reward. Maria, smiling, asks if he's an idiot and mentions that she's the one who called these people. She explains that she told the story of a brave student who saved a woman from a perverted noble. At this moment, the man charges toward the princess, shouting crude insults. However, his knights quickly restrain him and she states that he's a perverted noble who's about to be arrested. The noble wonders why the knights are here and Kanna comments that he truly is an idiot, because the person in front of him is far above nobility. She's Maria, the third princess. After everything is resolved, Maria thanks him for managing the situation and helping with an arrest. She remarks that it was just an attempt this time and the idea of forcing them to go home is the best they can do. At that moment, one of the guards approaches the princess, asking for guidance on patrols from now on. Kanna, stepping forward, politely asks for a moment. She thanks him for helping her earlier. Taking his hands, she also thanks him for standing up for her and for defending her work. The boy says it was nothing and then realizes he can now show his hands as he no longer has an injury. At that moment, the girl asks for his name. He replies that it's Kaneda. She mentions that she spent a lot of time with men in her life and is quite confident in her observation skills. Introducing herself, she says her name is Kana. Handing him a card, she says that the next time they meet, she hopes he has time to meet with her. Showing this exception in her work, it can see him immediately. Leaning close to his ear, she comments that if he's tired and wants to relieve some stress, she can help him for free. Walking away, she mentions she has work to do and that she'll see him again. Hearing this, the boy is left completely flustered and nervous. The Princess Maria then approaches the protagonist, commenting that he's very sharp. With the sun setting, he mentions it's time to head home. Bidding farewell, he tells them both to be careful on their way back. She then questions why he didn't invite her to walk home together, and he says someone from school might see them, so she should cover herself. Thoughtfully, the girl simply states that he and the streamer are very similar in many ways. Sometime later, the noble is in jail, and the guard informs him that they'll send him home tomorrow and that he should cool his head. The man is completely furious, complaining that this is happening, and that if it were just the princess, it would be fine. But that kid ended up humiliating him. He knows he's a commoner living in the capital named Canada, and that's more than enough information for him to do something. Sometime later, a user asks the streamer what he thinks about the power of his words. The kid says, hypothetically, if he had power, he would say he wanted to rule the world and questions what they would do about it. The 5 women who are infatuated with him respond that they'd help him without hesitation. Canada asks if everyone has gone crazy and comments that it's just a joke, so they shouldn't take it seriously. Reflectively, the boy realizes that in his old world, streamers cause wars over a simple joke, and he should be cautious about this. He mentions he's thinking of doing things beyond just chatting, and you should expect some reports on that from now on, because he plans to do things that streamers in the old world also did, like vlogging while streaming outdoors. At that moment, the anonymous princess donates, saying she loves him and calls him my lord. In response, the boy says he loves her too. This response drives her completely wild, and he says he loves everyone in the chat as well. Tired, the boy realizes this is very dangerous and that he shouldn't be doing things like this. A day then passes at school. Tired, he wonders why his desk is dirty first thing in the morning. 2 girls are discussing a rumor about an SS class member being the streamer. Maria claims that the streamer said he was an ordinary guy, a noble student, and drunk with great power. Thoughtful, Canada wonders if there was also this kind of talk in his class and that he is the streamer, and that a lot of impersonations appear when he's famous. So he decides to tell everyone it's all lies later. On live, he reflects on someone saying the student should know and questions if they don't suspect him, and that regarding noble students, he really doesn't want to deal with that. But he's a little curious about this impersonator. At that point, one of the girls asks the saint if something's wrong, and laughing, the girl says it's nothing. In the school corridor, the boy says this must be the place, and someone yells, declaring that he's the streamer. As he approaches, it's the annoying kid questioning why they don't believe him. He thinks that things happening this way are more beautiful compared to his old world since it's just about using a name. Disguising himself, he realizes he needs to find out why this kid is pretending to be him. Investigating the boy, the noble becomes very irritated, wondering why people listen to someone faceless and not to him. The protagonist begins to understand the essence of the problem. because as a streamer he would improve the family's reputation and bring money to his listeners. Or at least, that's what he wanted to do. The boy understands this is fake because it requires an unlimited amount of magic to do what he does. Then someone approaches, whispering that he's a truly foolish man. Looking back, Canada is startled and Maria says that someone so foolish could never be the savior. Maria apologizes, explaining they also had a similar plan, and Alfana sadically asks if he knows the streamer too. She mentions that she's actually a fan of his as well, which leaves Maria stunned. 3 minutes earlier, the two were talking behind the boy. The saint realizes that Maria doesn't seem to know Lord Canada's true identity. She comments that at the church, there are a few moments of rest and she listens to the streamer's voice to calm her heart and strengthen her soul. She asks if Maria does the same, and irritated, the girl says she didn't mean to say all that. Meanwhile, the noble wonders if no one's going to calm this guy down and questions if they're occultists. Maria then states that bringing her sword was the right decision. He feels happy that both the princess and the saint are his listeners. However, he also feels a bit of fear about how they seem to take his live comments so lightly. At that moment, Maria comments that she has really been watching over his actions, but if anyone sabotages another person, she cares and cannot forgive them in that moment. Seeing this, the boy thinks about how beautiful Princess Maria is. Approaching him, Alfana also says she cannot forgive them. She then asks Lord Canada's opinion. He responds that he thinks it's best for the boy to stop lying, and that even the streamer he claims to be wouldn't receive any severe punishment. Suddenly, a dark aura appears, almost swallowing up the noble, like Pac-Man and the ghost. In an instant, he vanishes completely. Perplexed, the protagonist questions what happened and asks where he went. Alfana then comments that she just felt the presence of a powerful dark force. The boy finds himself transported to the demon realm. The demon princess then asks if it's true that he's really a streamer. Trembling and sweating profusely, the boy can't respond due to the overwhelming fear he feels toward the demon. The demon's subordinate then says he's a fraud, noting that with such low mana, there's no way he could broadcast in all possible directions. She adds that she's aware of this and that he's merely using the name of the one she loves. With a repulsive glare, she says she presumes he's ready to pay for this sin. Collapsing to the ground, the boy begins to go into shock. Meanwhile, the others continue searching for the boy. Neither of them is worried about the noble, but the saint says that Sampa should be concerned about the situation. Maria suspects that if it were the demon, she would have kidnapped him to confirm the rumors. At that moment, the boy glances back. He's shocked to see a large black sphere similar to the one that swallowed the noble earlier. Grabbing both of them by the wrist, he says he doesn't know anything about fighting, but he has to protect them at the very least. As they back away from the area, they comment on a foul smell, and then the noble appears on the ground. The demoness appears as well, asking if they also find this quite embarrassing. Maria draws her sword, asking if she's a demon, and the saint prepares to use her magic. But then the demoness apologizes for her sudden appearance. She explains that her boss was very upset at him for pretending to be the streamer, so she stopped scolding him and came to return him. Both girls remain still, sensing no animosity from the demoness toward the noble. Curious, the demoness then asks if they intend to do the same thing her boss did. The protagonist realizes that he also has a group of demon listeners, and the boss, the demon queen, is also very beautiful and listens to all of his broadcasts. Maria then gets excited, saying that the streamer has even won over the Lady of the Demons, and the saint becomes equally thrilled by this. Confused, the demoness says these two exude the same aura as her boss. Observing the protagonist's presence, the demoness comments that he's more willing to accept her as a true streamer because unlike that noble, he has quite a bit of magic. At that moment, the boy decides to play dumb and asks what she's talking about. Suspicious, Maria realizes that the demons also find the boy's mana unusual. The saint explains to the demoness that she and Maria had their own plans for the noble but couldn't carry out a harsher punishment. Approaching the saint, the demon representative says she's very cool and that he likes her. Sometime later, the saint and the protagonist are sitting together on a bench. Maria went to report the incident and the demon left in an unknown shadow sphere. Exhausted, he comments that he's worn out from the day, and she says there were so many unexpected events. Suddenly, she calls in Lord Canada, approaches and takes his hand. She thanks him for his help earlier and says he made her very happy. Embarrassed, he thinks he'd like to say something, but it's too much, so he realizes he can't look her in the eye at all. Smiling, the saint comments that he's truly a wonderful person. Avoiding eye contact, he's deeply embarrassed and then realizes something. He says he can't just leave the noble alone here. Alfena then says it's very kind of him. A while later, the arrogant noble wakes up. Trembling, he calls out to the streamer, begging for help. He starts running in desperation, crying and asking for help from Lord Streamer once again. After this event, the augur or noble, as if he were a different person, confessed all his lies, told the truth to everyone, and publicly disclosed all the preemptive crimes of his entire family. A few days pass. Canada wonders if the demon queen truly watches his broadcast or someone calls his attention. Turning around, he realizes it's a woman. Disguised, the demon queen asks if he can show her around the city. Seeing no reason to refuse, he agrees. As she walks through the city, everyone marvels at her beauty. saying she's a treasure that came from the heavens. The demoness comments that it's truly interesting and that this is what they call the capital. The boy asks if it's her first time here, and she replies that it's her first time visiting the human kingdom, then corrects herself, saying it's her first time seeing this city. Smiling, the boy thinks she's easy on the eyes and wonders if she's a type of divine beauty. The mysterious woman then apologizes to him for making him spend his time guiding her around the city. But Canada says it's fine, as it's quite nice to walk alongside such a beautiful girl like her after all. Looking to the side, the boy feels shy at being complimented like that. He comments that there are some hidden spots in this city that are really nice, and he'll take her to them. Sometime later, they're both admiring the panoramic view of the city. The demoness reflects on how they're constantly trying to destroy such beautiful landscapes. Observing her, the boy thinks she's very strange and senses a different atmosphere around her. Curious, he asks if she isn't human, and the queen smiles, saying it's surprising. Because with these items she's wearing, she thought she was successfully hiding her identity. The queen comments that this is a wonderful feeling, leaving the boy a bit confused. Surprised, he asks again if she isn't human, and she replies that she isn't, adding that he's very perceptive. She comments that there are no humans nearby, that she hasn't sensed any magic, and that this hidden place is truly quite convenient. As a reward for seeing through her disguise, she says she'll show him who she really is. Swiftly, she begins to reveal her true identity. Surprised, the boy realizes that her aura is exactly the same as that of the demon representative from before. Introducing herself, she says she's a humble demon named Shruza. He introduces himself as well, saying his name is Canada. Suddenly, he realizes he's surrounded by darkness. She explains that she's isolated them from the outside world and that he's the only one who can perceive it at the moment. Curious, the protagonist remarks that there's magic like this in the world too. He comments that magic is undoubtedly deep and he should have studied more on the subject before attending school. Changing the subject, the woman asks what he thinks of demons. Quickly responding, he says that personally he doesn't think they're much different from humans, which surprises her. Continuing, he says that demons and humans have a history of fighting each other, but it would definitely be better if they started getting along. Because if someone dies in war, then demons will also shed tears. The woman explains that, in fact, they also shed tears when a comrade dies. Changing the subject again, she mentions that he has an impressive amount of mana. The boy realizes her servant had also said the same thing, understanding that the demons in this world can sense everyone's mana levels. She comments that the boy's mana is even stronger than hers, so he asks if she can see how high his mana reaches. In response, she explains that she can't see his limits and says she's ready to accept him now. Boldly, the boy asks what she means by that. Taking his hands, she comments that she wishes from the bottom of her heart for demon mana to walk hand in hand with his from now on. Canada agrees, saying the path won't be easy, but it seems this could happen eventually. He notices that the demoness's hands are a bit cold, but otherwise she's no different from humans. The boy then mentions that there's a guy named Streamer who shares the same opinion as both of them. He adds that Streamer also says it would be fine if both sides got along, and then he laughs. She laughs as well and explains that it's because she's a fan of his. In fact, she mentions that Streamer said the same things he did, and it was his own words that changed her perspective. Curious, Canada asks if Streamer is also famous in her kingdom, and she comments that he's quite popular, though the older elders don't like him very much. But the Demon King is already handling all of them. The boy then asks about the demon world and what kind of place it is. At that moment, the Demon Queen invites him to visit her world next time, saying that if they're with him, he can enter without trouble. After making this promise to meet again, the demoness returned home, and the strange day off for the protagonist began to come to an end. Furthermore, no one in the human realm knows the true name of the Demon King, and he has not realized who Shruza truly is. During a live stream, he mentions that everyone should sleep earlier sometimes as well. Already in bed getting ready to sleep, he says he's very tired from being a tour guide. However, as previously mentioned, Canada's strange day off started to come to an end. In his bed, the crow appears watching him, deciding to leap toward him with a frightening expression while he's asleep. Showing a flashback from a few days ago, the crow asks if she is the client this time, questioning who she wants dead. This is the Lord who was humiliated. As the same perverted Lord involved in the incident with Kana, Church, Maria, and Canada, he was sent back to his homeland. At that moment, he hands over the target's files and asks for his head. The crow realizes it is neither a noble nor an adventurer, but just a commoner in the capital. Hence, the job will be easy. The noble comments that he will never forgive him for making him look like a fool. At that moment, the crow simply accepts and says that the target had bad luck. The boy was about to thank him, but he quickly disappeared. Nindo states that with this plan, he will be killed. On the rooftop, the crow observes the capital and then descends the building. Upon landing, he states that he must now begin gathering information. After an hour of investigation, he already knows that the target buys a lot of bread at his store and helped the woman from the clutches of a pervert. However, he understands he can only continue as the crow. There is no other choice besides this. After an alley, she hears someone talking about being free. Looking, she realizes it is her target talking to Maria. In doubt, she understands that an existence like that even gives dubious assassins like herself a reason to live. Sometime later, the assassin is listening to the streamer's live session. The crow was also a girl of that age who only knew him through the city residence being just a mere coincidence. Just like the streamer who also hid his identity, the assassin did the same. Thus, she considered it one of their similarities and formed a parasocial bond with him. She herself didn't expect to like him that much. Several times, she ignored the call for work just to listen to him, so she had completely fallen under his influence. At one point, he was asked about assassins, and the streamer says he knows about them to some extent. The assassin says she was only surprised that the person who asked was well informed. With that, the streamer says that assassins are kind of scary, always feared and despised by the population, so she thinks she knows she's doing something wrong. However, surprisingly, he says he finds them quite cool too, as they hide in the shadows and kill their targets stealthily. Yet, accepting a crime is a bit hard to think of positively, but he just finds it interesting that people are in this line of work. The naive crow had already fallen completely in love with him. Putting on her outfit, she states that he was distracted for too long. At that moment, she realizes that this is the target's house. She notices that he left the window open and that it was a careless mistake. With her back turned to the target, holding her sword, she apologizes to him. She states that he can hate her for as long as he wants, and the boy says it's time to start the stream. Upon hearing this, she becomes extremely confused, thinking of the word stream and making a connection with the term streamer. The boy gets up, saying he needs to close the windows so that no one can hear him, and she quickly hides on the ceiling. The intuition of Ander's listeners greatly disrupts normal people, or perhaps it was her assassin's gaze, it's hard to tell. However, at that moment, she realized that Canada and the streamer are the same person. She is completely bewildered, wondering if she is dreaming for the chance to see him in person and hear his stream. Distressed, she understands she must not lose sight of his presence even for a second. Meanwhile, at his home, the noble laughs, saying he heard that the crow is quite brutal and that he is definitely making that peasant cry in pain right now. However, the crow was enjoying the first public recording session of this world. Going to sleep, the protagonist says he's exhausted and bids himself good night. And in this bizarre way, we arrive at today. Without rest and without feeling sleepy, Pellis was watching in Canada's room. However, even the legendary crow eventually grew tired. Waking up after saliva was splashed on his forehead, he wonders if rainwater is coming in and comments that he should go to the bathroom. But looking up, he notices the presence of the assassin and is completely shocked. Crouching down, he asks why she is there and who she is. However, more than being discovered and failing her mission, she was very happy that Canada finally saw her. And so to his question, the crow, with absolute confidence, responded, "It's a pleasure to meet you, noble streamer," she says, adding that she's just a normal person with no suspicious intentions. Perplexed, he asks if she really thinks he would believe that. From that moment on, his live streaming activities would be thrown into chaos, but he had no reason to know that yet. Bowing, she asks him to believe her, saying that she's a fan. He doesn't know what to do since she already knows his identity, so he asks who she is. In response, she says her name is Mira, and that she's also the crow sometimes. He asks if it's like the bird, but then begins observing the object she brought. He then questions if she's talking about the legendary assassin, and she replies affirmatively. Curious, he asks why this legendary assassin would infiltrate his room and watch him sleep. She replies that it's because she's a huge fan of his. Not understanding anything, he thinks that this definitely didn't happen in his last life. Then she asks if he's worried and if she's the cause, to which he responds yes. Holding her sword, she says she understands and that now it's goodbye. She says she'll die now, and desperate, Canada begs her to stop. However, she abruptly stops talking and makes a slight cut on her neck. Worried, he asks if she was trying to die, and Mira says it's because she caused him trouble and calls him sir. Suddenly, they step back from each other. With a frightening look, she says that if the sir doesn't consider her a nuisance, she clearly has no value as a servant. Smiling, the boy thinks she's the type who would die if he asked her to, and that she has crossed all the boundaries of a Yandir, making him feel like he might cry from that realization. He explains that she misunderstood him and that this wasn't what he wanted to happen, then asks if she's okay. He tells her that for now, she just shouldn't die and that if she were to behead herself, the blood would be troublesome to clean up. Mira then asks if she should do it elsewhere, and he replies that's not the issue. Then he calls for her attention. Interrupting, she says he's the only one who knows she's the crow and that her name is real. Curious, he asks if that means he will be killed. Moving slowly, she asks by whom and that she will get rid of them immediately. Curious, the boy says he doesn't believe she's the crow and asks if she can prove it somehow. She then mentions that she's quite skilled at concealing her presence. Quickly, she disappears from the spot, which leaves him very frightened. Looking around, he says he didn't sense any magic and asks if it's a spell. However, Mira says she's right in front of him. He waves his hand to try to grab something, then touches something, but he ends up touching a not-so-desirable area. Embarrassed, he says he's very sorry, and she comments that it's fine, because being touched by him makes her very happy, and the boy, seeing this, feels uncomfortable, embarrassed, and exhausted. Changing the subject, he asks again why she's in his room. Mira explains the whole situation to the protagonist, and he understands that a person can be killed just for that in this world. But he asks if she still plans to kill him, and she herself replies absolutely not, because she will protect him instead of causing harm. Then she explains who made the request. He understands that her mission was to kill him, and then senses another presence. At his home, the noble calls the crow a traitor, but doesn't last long. The protagonist is at home watching the live stream while she watches from the ceiling. Putting on the gift, he says this sums everything up and that he should avoid killing the person necessarily. Only the boy understands that she trusted the guard to watch his back, but wants to leave her side to the quote maker. Suddenly, his terminal starts lighting up. Upon grabbing it, he realizes he received the letters he requested and that he's going to see them now. However, the message surprises him. Someone commented that the streamer is a mass murderer. They comment that they only thought they would resort to such means for fame and that they cannot forgive his sins, because projecting his voice to such an extent requires a lot of mana, and no matter how much he saves, he will die if he's alone. Or, in other words, he will need the mana of a large number of humans. At this moment, they ask the streamer how many lives he has taken and how much suffering he has caused just to get to where he is now. They conclude by saying they will never forgive him and that they will bring him down with force. In shock, the boy questions himself about what is being said and how his reputation has spread so much in just a few days. In his mind, he affirms that he's using his own mana, but only for the extremities. He asserts that this is going to be a problem while the assassin is savoring the master's pride. Coming towards him, she asks what happened. Perceptive, he realizes that in his past life, rumors like these would cause exposures and end up giving strange labels to celebrities. However, he never imagined that this would happen to him. Changing the subject, Canada asks the boy what she did in his bed, and she avoids the question. The streamer, a big name in this world called Adoracia. Many ended up enchanted by his values and beliefs, becoming listeners and Anders. However, this streaming culture was constantly spreading among the general population. Abolition of slavery, peace treaty with demons, dismantling of bandit guilds, refinement of discrimination based on profession. That afternoon, a power that could move countries with a single word was envied by all among a few others trying to stream as well. In a small country close to Rogia's at the noble Sempi household, someone yells at a woman saying that this isn't even close to enough mana. He shouts at several people, calling them all useless, and asks why they think they were bought. One of his subordinates calls him, saying that he believes he already knows, but mana is as valuable as blood to them, and that if they drain their mana to the limit, they will die, forcing them to buy new slaves and further increasing expenses. He states that this was the last batch, that there's none left. The man then says that slaves at the bottom of the barrel can only give so little, and that the kingdom's presence has implemented new slavery laws, making it difficult even to obtain new goods in this country. The fact that she wants us to treat these things kindly is stupid. However, he says they managed to capture an SS rank adventurer yesterday. Curious, he asks his subordinate how it's going, and the man says it's enough to cover the streaming time for 5 minutes. Shaking with rage, the boss questions how they will compare with the streamer and understands that he has a lot of mana, but realizes that he's the only guy with enough for a full night stream, and that's impossible. Thus, this is how rumors about the streamer began. The man asks that everyone anonymously report this, and they will reveal the sins of this bastard and drag him into hell. He declares that he will give him that mana, and he will do it at the end of the stream. Returning to the present, seeing this rumor, the boy is in shock. Mira asks if he's okay with leaving them alone, and he replies that he wants to wait to see how it ends. However, she argues, saying that this doesn't work and that she doesn't want him to be misunderstood by this world. Putting on glasses, she explains that if they are a nuisance, she can handle them, but then suddenly suggests they could sell their organs. Reflective, the protagonist says he thought all his fans were kind people. He comments that he's going for a walk and that he wants to calm down a bit. She follows him, and he tells her just to make sure no one sees her. Annoyed, she asks if he thinks she's a stalker and asserts that she's not. They both walk outdoors together on this full moon night, and the boy comments that it's really nice. Suddenly, that stream appears, saying they are all those who took advantage without thinking of the streamer's madness. The man comments that he was sure some of them already knew, but none know the true evil of the streamer. He warns that within 5 minutes they will learn the whole truth. Seeing all this, people begin to believe that it really makes sense to think he killed many people just to gain enough mana. Several boys watching ask if he might be right. The protagonist's admirers also observe, growing furious. In a rage, they question how he dares to do this. How dare he do something like that to their streamer? Meanwhile, he continues walking with Mira, but she seems restless. She thinks that if the noble streamer were by her side, she might have already taken everything down within 5 meters. The foolish chief Rekipa ended up stepping directly on the tail of a soundly sleeping tiger. Some time later, it's announced that the class will begin. He's sitting on a bench, wondering what to do now. Then imagines all of his listeners wondering about that guy's broadcast and believing it, because many people ask how his streams worked before, but he preferred not to answer. And his only excuse was that he could do it because he was himself, since the infinite magical energy he received when he incarnated is apparently a unique ability in this world, allowing him to cast high-level spells multiple times without worrying about mana. Besides being immune to any enemy that drains magical energy, even when relaxing, he ends up kind of outdoing everyone else unintentionally. However, he's the first with this type of ability, so no one would believe it. He states it's better to keep this power a secret. As long as he can keep streaming, that's good enough. He thinks his haters are creating conspiracy theories and hopes this doesn't turn into a big problem. At that moment, Mira appears beside him on the bed, apologizing for making him wait. This startles him and she asks if he's okay. But he comments that she shouldn't do that. With that, Mira hands him the paper, saying she did her best to gather information. She says she had to use a bit of force, but since it's my lord's request, she'd be willing to do anything, and he thanks her. At that moment, she lies down directly on his bed, going completely wild in her mind after receiving praise from her master. However, he thinks she's just tired and has fallen asleep. The environment analysis points to a small country, quite far away, with a noble named Semphi behind this whole scheme. As a result, a group of envious streamers has formed, and they are creating an entire organization. However, looking at the girl, he realizes he should have expected this from the crow, as she gathers highly detailed information. Standing up, the girl comments that if he wants, she can gather more information. Then she leaves, and the boy is very surprised because she managed to uncover information so quickly. He had only requested information last night. He immediately asked her to investigate that broadcast using her information network. And of course, she calmly accepted the request. The rumors consist of saying that the streamer gains the trust of his slaves and supports them in order to absorb all their energy. Throwing the paper on the table, he says it's pretty creative. The theory also suggests that those who support him might be under intense brainwashing, and ending his existence would be the fastest way to halt his criminal actions. Reading all of this, the boy becomes extremely irritated. Even in this situation where listeners believe these rumors, at least it seems to be a small part of his entire follower base. So he understands it's just information, and it's not as if he has any injury on himself. However, if he ignores all this that's happening, he'll end up being harmed. He thinks he needs a way to clear up this misunderstanding, but words alone aren't enough. He quickly thinks of a plan. He could show his hands during the broadcast, and if he does this imitating the school admission test, he might be able to change everything. It's about an orb he has to touch during the admission test, which is the item that evaluates the amount of mana a person has. If he could use it in front of his listeners, it would be proof that he's streaming with his own power. However, it seems like an expensive item and not something someone would lend easily. Two girls come into the protagonist's view from afar. Maria Quest, that's her name, and he's thinking about that fraudulent test. While Alfana Quest, that's her name, he's thinking about purifying this world of sinners. With that, both approach the protagonist. Frightened, he stands up, realizing they're Princess Maria and Alfana. At that moment, they fall silent, which leaves him quite confused. Both seem scared, thinking they were close, and that they must be cautious. At this moment, he starts to speak, but Maria interrupts, saying he doesn't need to finish the sentence for her to understand. She explains that she's someone who helps those in need and someone they can trust. She says that in this difficult time they will help, so she asks him to share his troubles. The saint says that they just happen to be born blessed with power and influence. However, she comments that these things should be used to help those in need, so she asks them to trust her. Nervous, the boy realizes that if it's these two, he can trust them. Clenching his fists, he states that he has a request for both of them. However, he says that before making this request, he must apologize and reveals that he is a streamer. This information leaves the two in shock. He thinks that if he told them suddenly, they'd be speechless, and that regardless of timing, perhaps their doubts have been too repetitive. He thinks he's also unsure if they'll believe his word. Suddenly, the saint begins to speak, revealing that she's known this truth for a long time, which surprises them both. She explains that when he got hurt for the first time, he had a small injury on his hand, and right after that, he showed his hands on the same day's broadcast. Completely shocked, the princess realizes he's a streamer and had no idea all this time. Looking back, the saint thinks her intuition was correct. And moreover, Maria says she also knew, as his accent caught her attention. It was surprisingly easy. Adaptable, the boy realizes he unconsciously gave hints about his identity to both of them, and it was a good job not to let anyone else know. Nervous, Maria says of course she's totally confident, and the saint adds that it happened naturally. With that, she moves toward the protagonist and takes his hands. She says that despite knowing the truth, they are his fans above all else, which means they would never do anything to cause any kind of trouble, because otherwise they couldn't be considered true fans at all. Maria agrees with Alfana, saying she's eager to hear his words with that always fearless attitude of his. Maria then gets irritated at being called princess, saying he can treat her the same as Alfana, forgetting the formalities, explaining that he doesn't need to call her princess for now, and the boy says he understands. However, the saint then moves to gather Maria, pulling her away from him. The princess then explains that they are a priestess and a princess, and can ask for anything he wants since they're allies. Both hold his hands as he thinks that even knowing his identity, these two revealed nothing and kept everything secret. He's sure now they're trustworthy, and he knows this. However, they're almost being intimidating, and maybe he's imagining things since they seem quite different from usual. And yet, they're standing very close to him and staring at him. Quickly, he begins to look around, wondering if anyone nearby is listening and watching everything. Alfana then asks if he's really checking to see if no one is around. She states that she cast magic to keep everyone else away before the conversation started, and seeing his expression, assumed he didn't want anyone else hearing. Impressed, he comments that Alfana is incredible and thanks her. At that moment, he says he was about to talk to both of them regarding the rumors about the streamer, and they both say they're already aware of the matter. Maria mentions that she asked her parents to do something about the rumors, and thanks to a collaboration with the ministry, they already uncovered the source. Upon hearing this term, collaborator, he immediately thinks of an assassin. The explanation continues. Maria says that they claim it's a rental, but no such case has been found in the country, that the mana he consumes is more than a normal person could possess, and her parents have started to consider that he has more mana than anyone else in this world, or that he's using some unknown device to create mana to conduct these broadcasts. Nervous, the girl asks if she could ask this. It might be bad to ask as a fan, and he thinks she hit the nail on the head. The priestess says that, in other words, even if he doesn't count on her, many followers were already moving to put an end to this quickly, and that his name carries great significance in this world. Many people and many of his followers will forgive anything that troubles him. However, he thinks he doesn't want anyone else cleaning up his mess and asserts that he wants to prove his innocence with his own hands. For that reason, he says he would like to ask both of them for help since he trusts them both. Seeing this, both the priestess and the princess hold themselves back, but inside they're thrilled. At this moment, the protagonist realizes that this is quite embarrassing after all. After this, he begins to explain the plan, and the two regain their composure, becoming firm and focused. He mentions the orb he saw when he first entered the school, which seems very valuable since it prevents anyone from touching it and is kept deep within the school. He then says he needs it to resolve this issue. After hearing this, both Maria and Alfana approach him. Maria says that, as a princess, she will make sure he's authorized to use it, and the same as a priestess says she grants permission. With confident expressions, they say that no matter what situation unfolds, they will both take responsibility. So finally, the streamer and his followers will come together to put an end to these rumors. And as this event will change the streamer's position, it will be revealed very soon. Classes are over, so he says it seems he can prepare some things for tomorrow. He thanks them for being able to help him, and he comments that he will take a break from streaming and prepare as much as possible tonight. After hearing this, the two feel a bit down, realizing there won't be a live stream tonight. Bidding farewell, he mentions that he'll start the plan and tells them to meet tomorrow at 6 p.m. at the agreed place. Sometime later, someone knocks on Alfana's door. She promptly answers and is surprised to see who's there. It's Maria, and she asks if something happened. She then questions if it's about Mr. Canada. Gripping her by the shoulders, Maria says that's exactly what it's about. In shock, she asks if he really is the streamer. The priestess asks her to stop shaking her and to calm down first. The princess then starts running toward the window. She leaps toward it, breaking it, and exclaims that her idol is her own classmate, while Alfana begs her to stop destroying her room. A short while later, the window was repaired with magic. Explaining, Maria tells her not to misunderstand, as she was never certain, but she somehow sensed something. She mentions she isn't lying, as the way he spoke always felt familiar to her. At that, Alfana tells her to stop complaining and that she can arrange future encounters to make Mr. Canada fall in love with her. Doing several calculations in her head, the princess begins to wonder how she should refer to the streamer, whether as Canada or the streamer. At that moment, the princess asks if this means they are basically married, and Alfana comments that's a very absurd conclusion. Ignoring her, Maria asks when he'll start planning the wedding ceremony. Annoyed, she declares that she'll be Canada's wife, not the priestess. In her mind, Alfana thinks that Maria is getting carried away and that she should warn him before Maria claims her rights over him as a princess. Raising a finger, she asks Maria if she can say something. Quickly, she clamps the girl's mouth shut. Pointing a finger to her head, she says that when they're at school, he'll be Mr. Canada, not Mr. Streamer, and warns that if Maria does anything that puts him in trouble, she won't forgive her, even if they are friends. Maria then recalls that she hasn't seen that look on her face since she swapped out her alarm clock for a bomb when they were 5 years old. The priestess tells her to think for a moment, after everything is over, that we're the only ones who know his identity. In other words, they're ahead of all the other fans and can now support him from here on out. However, suddenly, Maria thinks of some rather inappropriate things, even though they have nothing to do with the topic. And in fact, currently only a few listeners truly know the streamer's real identity. Meanwhile, the Demon Queen is in shock at the lack of a live stream today. Maria then agrees with Alfana that she's right. Concluding, Alfana says that from here on, they'll support him in every way they can to make sure no one finds out, and that this way, they become fans who truly know the streamer. These two were previously described as listeners and fans, but it seems that was a mistake, because the way they are now is much more than just simple fans. The priestess tells Maria that they're allies and should work together with Mr. Canada. Since saints are needed, these two ended up helping each other and uniting for the sake of just one man. It's a strong friendship between two young women. However, each one thinks she'll become Canada's favorite. One believes it's because she was the first person to know who the streamer truly is, while Maria was the first to recognize his talents. In reality, in the end, they're simply Yanders after all. The Saint questions Maria, asking if she's as much a fan as she is, and the girl responds that they're quite similar in that way. Tonight, Mr. Canada will be busy, so there won't be a live stream, and she suggests they use their voices to raise morale tomorrow. Concluding that, luckily, there won't be classes tomorrow, she says just preparing isn't enough. Maria then asks which stream she saved, and the priestess says she saved it while they acted in style. At that moment, they start hearing the broadcast voice. Overjoyed, they scream that they love Mr. Streamer. In that instant, they lose any pretense of hiding anything, as if they stopped holding back and scream their love all night long. Bidding farewell, the boy talks about starting the plans at the place they arranged. When he arrives home, he mentions he can't wait to resolve these issues to do the special live stream tomorrow. Leaving his room, he begins to check the security. Then he understands pretty standard, thinking he wouldn't be able to convince them to let him leave. However, someone can make that happen. Mira suddenly appears, asking if he called for her. Lifting her into his arms in her croak costume, they start to head out. Curious, she asks my lord what he needs so late at night in the capital. Smiling, he replies that he just needs an adult's help, and that's all. Arriving at Khan's workplace, she tells them to get straight to the point as she was waiting for him, but the boy says he's not here for that. He says that no matter the price, he'll pay. He just needs an outfit made very quickly. She doesn't quite understand but says she'll draft a map immediately and assures him he doesn't need to worry. And he really doesn't need to worry as they're very discreet. After that, the boy and Mira roam through the capital until only an hour remains before the meeting time. An hour later, he was at the designated location. Seeing that it's a castle, he wonders if they can really use this place for a live stream. He thinks it's exactly what he expected from them and is glad they're allies. He states that he'll place an order with them next time. With his new outfit, he comments that it's really well made. The equipment is also good, with a portable camera that needs no further adjustments. Suddenly, someone knocks on his door and he allows them to enter. It's the two looking very nervous, and he thinks he should mentally prepare them. The boy says they don't need to appear on the stream, but both say they want to help as it will lessen the chance of people discovering he's not a commoner. This is their meeting from the previous day. With their plan, people may figure out he's a student living at the school. Maria says it's true since Alfana discovered it just from his hands. She also mentions that he can use the secret village for other missions and even their parents won't know. However, even for a secret village, it's hard to hide. However, she explains that people look directly at her, so they won't notice anything else. Alfana comments that her magic to make people overlook things stems from her being a saint, making people ignore the affected area. Essentially, that's how this magic works. Now she's casting magic over the entire village and says she'll ensure the barrier is modified tomorrow so she can see it. She asserts that if she combines her magic with his while streaming, they can broadcast freely without worry about anyone tracking them. Maria is thrilled with this news and hugs him. He comments that if he can master this, he'll be able to conduct secure broadcasts on his own, which shocks them both. Alfana explains that this magic is passed from saint to saint and that even though he's Mr. Canada, he cannot betray the church. Maria then argues that it's useful for him to avoid being discovered, and the saint adds that he needs her. Back in the present, the protagonist thinks he should thank them again and again. Looking up at the ceiling, he sees Mira giving a thumbs up, signaling for him to do his best. Sipping a drink, she comments that he should take care until she's satisfied and assures him that if anything happens, she'll be there. Sometime later, these people are on their phones eagerly waiting for the new live stream. At that moment, the bed wishes Mr. Canada good luck. Even the demon queen herself says she believes in the streamer. The other demons also wonder if he's different from other humans and if he's not a threat. Right then, the clock announces that the time has come. The protagonist declares that it's time to go live. He says they will act as planned, then calls the two to take their positions. Mainly, he feels very nervous, but he thinks this is just an evolution of his live streams. He needs to be fully present in this world on his first attempt and seize this chance. The two girls are also ready. Meanwhile, someone laughs confidently, saying that whatever excuse the streamer invents, this will be his last live. At that moment, the live stream begins and the hero says that if any of them see an opportunity, they should go for it. Upon seeing this, everyone is shocked and very surprised. Wearing a mask, he addresses all his listeners and asks if they missed him. In this way, the curtains for what would be called the streamer's redemption were lifted for a brief moment, and of course his followers reacted to all of it. Everyone is stunned as they recognize from the way he speaks and moves that this is indeed the streamer. The boy asks how they're doing and wonders if they can forgive him for not showing his face. All the people watching the live stream are in shock as the streamer is right there on their screens before their eyes. He continues explaining that he wanted to prove his innocence and address a few accusations. Thus, he decided to do a different kind of live stream this time. He mentions that recently a certain country has accused him of committing murder to perform his broadcasts, and he can't ignore those who treat him like a criminal based on prejudice, so the boy laughs, asking if he's trying to threaten him. Moving on, the hero says it's still painful and questions if everyone is listening, calling them idiot haters. He adds that he can only sleep at night thanks to them, and it's irritating. Seeing this, the guards start laughing, saying this is good. But noticing their humble lord is angry, they apologize. The protagonist explains that today he's going to show everyone how his live stream works, but before that, he'd like to introduce his assistants. Someone comments that the truth will finally be revealed, that they won't take their eyes off the screen, and he's probably innocent. The demon then wonders if someone other than her has helped him. The girl explains that these two have come from afar to assist him. Introducing themselves, one says she's Maria, the third princess of Rhogias, and the other says her name is Alfana, also known as the Saint. They comment that both are also fans of Lord Streamer and asked him to let them join him once, and he was kind enough to agree. Realizing the situation, Canada asserts that these two must also know Canada well. Someone in the chat comments that since he knows them personally, it must mean he lives in Rhogias. The Saint then casts a spell, focusing exclusively on Mr. Streamer's words and actions. The spell works, and he thinks he just needs to hide the comments in the broadcast. In the kingdom of Senfio, the man is utterly distressed. He says it feels like snow is falling on his head, making it impossible to focus and figure out who he is. The boy announces that it's now time for the main event. He then asks his Saint to demonstrate. The presenter explains that everyone is familiar with the orb, which shows a person's mana level. She calls the princess attention for her to demonstrate. She comments that the foundation of the light and color needs is here, and mana shines like gold. Therefore, the amount she has is classified as SSS. Canada says that now that they know this, they must be wondering how much mana he has. He answers that he has an infinite amount, and that, in other words, mana is required for his streams, and he has it all by himself, without anyone's help. Seeing this, the person spreading lies is in shock over the concept of infinite mana. Meanwhile, he thinks this method is a bit simple. The night before, the boy confirmed with Mira that he would place his mana in the orb and prove that he has an infinite amount, and that their presence would help as anyone would be convinced if they were there. Pointing at the assassin, he asks her not to look away. His hand approaches the orb. Placing his hands on it, a brilliant light begins to reflect. Mira comments that just as it shines gold, it turns into a sinister black, and when it shines black, it shifts back to vibrant gold. The assassin realizes it's as if his mana were infinite and attempting to break the orb. The chat goes wild, saying they've never seen anything like it and questioning if this is real. Having successfully demonstrated his mana, the boy thinks he didn't break it this time. However, he wonders why he's floating, and Mary notes that he's glowing like a rainbow. Suddenly, the orb flies toward the window, shatters it, and goes outside. In shock, he calls for the orb to come back and asks where it's going. As he runs, he asks the two to help him, and they follow his request. However, she accidentally bumps into the tripod, causing it to fall to the ground. All three are exhausted, and the boy questions what's happening. Someone tells people to look outside and says it's insane. They say this is what surprised Lord Streamer and wonders what's going on now. Impressed, Kana comments that it's terrifying yet ephemeral. Meanwhile, the demon says it's also very beautiful. Mira, too, is surprised, asking what it is. It's a giant orb shining in the sky. In some regions of the world, it looks like some kind of aurora borealis. Even the protagonist comments on this. Confused, Mary asks if this sky phenomenon is called the aurora. Sometime later, the aurora borealis fades and the orb returns to the priestess's hand. She comments that all the mana leaking from the orb caused this miracle. This event wasn't confined to this country alone, but reached all other nations. And this aurora proved that the streamer truly has infinite mana. However, he ended up forgetting something crucial. In the world of Ataraxia, auroras are a phenomenon that doesn't exist. In summary, he made a huge blunder. Meanwhile, the liar is in a catatonic state, saying it's all a lie and that he really does steal mana from slaves. In other words, everyone believed that the night sky was intentionally created by him. Many in the chat claim that the streamer can control the skies and must be a ruler of the heavens. In shock, the boy wonders if they're exaggerating a bit, and the three, moved and teary-eyed, vow to follow Lord Streamer for the rest of their lives. Then, after this event, a day passes. People are wondering if he'll stream today as well and can hardly wait. The demon asks another if he's also watching, and his friend replies that he is. Meanwhile, at school, he reflects on how popular he's become, feeling it's a great honor. However, he thinks at least he'll be able to nap during breaks, and that he has to keep moving every day and hasn't been able to sleep much lately. Someone then comments that the miracle was divine and incredible. The priest is explaining that it's called an aurora, and the boy wonders why he's taking credit for it. Mostly, he thinks that in his past life, this phenomenon existed since ancient times, even before Christ. Then he realizes that these two perspectives are entirely different. Curious, several others ask the fan what the streamer was like and what they talked about. Maria interrupts, saying she has a commitment now and should ask more later. Thoughtfully, Canada understands that he owes them a lot for this and needs to find a way to thank them. After class, he stretches, saying it's time to go home and get some sleep. Suddenly, someone appears, questioning who he thinks he is. The nobles remark that he's just a commoner, while the girls tell him not to talk like that because they're envious. The bully then approaches the princess. The boy realizes that emotions and opinions are why nobles always initiate this kind of dispute. Maria mentions that sometime after the live stream, the knights found Hess's house and he was exiled, admitting his wrongs before being arrested. Whether the consequences broke him or if he gained awareness of his errors before being detained, he gave his entire fortune to his slaves. Kneeling, he says he offers this and humbly apologizes to them all. Canada thinks that something must have happened to change his attitude. In fact, the Demon Queen forced him to do this an hour before the knights arrived. She comments that her subordinates are skilled and finding an insect like him was easy. However, the boy thinks he must ensure this doesn't happen again, so he'll have to ask his listeners to be more reasonable in their judgments. Still, he's ultimately responsible for it all and needs to be more cautious in handling things. Suddenly, the priest greets Mr. Canada good morning and comments that he looks quite tired. Being honest, he says the same of her. She notices his sigh and asks if he's thinking about something. With a puppy dog look, she asks if he's planning to stop streaming. He quickly responds that he's not. He mentions that he's received some strange attention but will keep streaming as usual to ensure he and his listeners have fun. The saint remarks that she and Maria are very worried about him and he thanks her, expressing gratitude for the support. With a sly smile, she says she'll support him even more from now on. Back at home, he announces his return, but looking at the bed, he realizes Mira is no longer there. However, from below him, she asks how she can help him. The boy is so startled that he runs to his bed. He tells her to go home immediately and asks if she plans to follow him forever. But she says she just wants to protect him, so he asks about her work. Wearing a uniform from some place, she replies that she's retiring from her role as the Crow, and she's sure her father is overjoyed watching from heaven. At that, he notices something odd. He thinks he might be credited with the Crow's disappearance and hopes that doesn't happen. Pulling her by the shirt, he tells her to go home right now. Sometime later, Maria heads home as well. Exhausted, she remarks that she's finally home after work and wanted to see Canada. However, looking to the side, she notices the presence of the streamer. In shock, she asks who that girl is, and he replies that she's just a weird, unemployed person. However, the assassin claims she's the Lord's bodyguard. Suspicious, Maria hesitates, and the boy says that's a lie, and she knows it. Watching from a hidden spot, the priestess thinks that if he likes small bodyguards, then she should be chosen. In front of the school, a woman appears, remarking that it's unusually noisy here, and asks if Canada is helping someone again. Appearing, she comments that he might be surprised she took a break to come visit. However, the demon also shows up to take a peek. Both stare at each other, wondering if they've met before. Thus, the flame war was resolved, a type of online argument where participants exchange aggressive and hostile messages. But this was only the beginning, and from that point on, they would constantly attract attention. However, the streamer doesn't stop advancing. Sometime later, he thinks he's finally reached the point where he can do informative streams and vlogs, and that his possibilities are now endless. Avoiding reality and focusing only on growing even more. Reincarnation is a special word for him, and the one guiding Canada, the protagonist, blessing his future, is watching everything with joy, smiling from the heavens. In fact, this is all just the goddess observing, commenting that she's been watching since the beginning, and that he keeps having fun. And she never imagined he would use the mana she granted him for this. It's truly interesting. Showing off a shirt with his likeness, she mentions that she's looking forward to watching tonight's stream. Among all of them, he thinks he's exhausted and that he needs to go home and prepare. At that exact moment, all five realize it's Canada, or rather, the streamer. Quickly, they all rush toward him without hesitation. He's watching the chapel and talking to the saint about his followers. The priestess then asks him what he thinks of his followers. In his mind, he understands that they're essentially sponsors and supporters. The woman comments that it's been a week since the aurora, yet people are still fascinated by it. She adds that color artists are even competing to depict it, and while photos are nice, items are better to hold and touch. So the two suggest they make streamer-related merchandise, and he notes that it would take a while to get there based on what he thought. Looking at their faces, he realizes that the saint wants to boost his reputation as a streamer. He then asks if they're both okay with this, given their personal responsibilities and concerns. Maria explains that this won't be recorded officially, won't interfere with work, and won't be a problem as long as they keep it among themselves. Thoughtfully, he understands that, compared to what happens at school, it's like a breath of fresh air, and that it would end with both of them. If no one noticed that she had just saved his life. For if he'd made that joke silently, their devotion would only grow stronger, and something strange might have happened to him. Returning to the conversation, he wonders aloud what they should do first, and the saint begins to explain. She then leads them to a statue and explains that this statue of the goddess mysteriously appeared wearing the streamer's shirt this morning. She also mentions they couldn't find the culprit. Maria, in shock, questions who would do such a thing. However, Alfana says that since it's Lord Streamer, it's fine. They agreed on that, so they ask if this church is normal. She explains that the boy has fans everywhere and hopes he doesn't mind as they use magic to conceal this entity. Hidden, the three girls observe and ask if that person is a friend from school, the princess's servant, or a new staff member. Intervening in the conversation, Maria asks if the goddess herself wore this shirt. Wouldn't that be a divine omen? Alfana quickly agrees and gets excited, but the princess says it was just a joke. Sometime later, one of the goddesses is seen with several streamer shirts, and her friend asks how they were made. Back with the trio, Maria says it's still early, but they should wrap things up for today, so he asks what happened. She explains that, by the way, Alfana has something she needs to do, so he realizes this involves politics. But Maria says that wasn't what she meant, and he interrupts, wishing them both good luck. With a suspicious smile, Alfana says he's about to do something he'll understand soon, calling him Time Lord. Sometime later, he's in a part of the capital he doesn't frequent, noting how refreshing this place feels. At that moment, the stalker assassin shows up, saying a new shop opened yesterday and asks if he wants to check it out. However, the girl is quickly startled by her presence, and he questions Mira on how long she intends to stick around since he told her to find somewhere else to live. Looking at him, she says no repeatedly, so he asks why she's so surprised. He comments that he's happy she's his fan, but she shouldn't misunderstand. He explains that she's grateful for not revealing his identity, and that she helped him more than anyone else with the accusations. Lifting her into his arms, he comments that being a stalker is pretty bad and suddenly tosses her into a box. Trembling, she says she'll try to find a home for herself. Seeing this scene, the girl feels hurt and remembers her mother saying that picking up abandoned animals isn't a good thing. Ignoring her, he begins to walk away, saying he's moving on to the next thing. Crying, she recalls the part where he says to the next card, then says she's moved. He begins staring at a building, wondering if it's the place where Kana works. Mira mentions that it seems like there are already many customers, even though it's midnight, and Kana appears, saying most of them are adventurers heading home and night shift soldiers. Suddenly, he looks back with a smile, and she comments that it's nice to see him again. They exchange glances and remember that they were both at school 6 days ago. Kanata starts to feel embarrassed as they quickly greet each other, introducing themselves. They begin to size each other up, and the protagonist doesn't understand what they're talking about. Sometime later, the two are inside Kanata's establishment, and Mira wonders how much everything cost. Smiling, she says she was just about to have lunch, so they arrived at the perfect time. Upon receiving the feast, they're both astonished, wondering if it's really okay. Impressed, he thinks this is first-class food compared to what he could afford, and he's too stunned to think straight. A while later, they finish eating, and the boy asks if she usually eats with other people, to which Kana replies that she usually does with her co-workers. Changing the subject, she asks if he knows Princess Maria and Saint Alfana, to which he responds yes. With a sinister look, she comments that she recently dined with those two damn nuisances. Hearing this, the boy is stunned and not understanding what's going on. He then asks when she met them, and she replies it was about 6 days ago. She explains that they wanted knights to start resting from now on, and after handling the arrangements, established a business relationship with the royalty. Fearful, they approached because of certain things, dined, and talked about supporting a certain streamer, and upon hearing this, the boy spits out his drink. Smiling, Kana comments that it's nothing official yet, but she's now becoming the third member. He asks what happened, and he replies that he choked on water. In his mind, the boy comments that they talked about creating products, but not about founding a fan club. Curious, he then asks Kana if she's also a listener. Without hesitation, she replies yes. She explains that she was saved by his words, that the streamer is the most important and precious person in this world to her. Canada is shocked to hear this while the assassin girl thinks she overslept and missed the chance to infiltrate the meeting. So she had no idea about any of this. At that moment, she starts reflecting on the meeting and the support group. Suddenly, she stands up, saying she's going to wash her hands. Kana then calls the protagonist over. Approaching him, she comments that since he's here, she wonders if he wants her to be his first. In shock, he comments that it's too soon, so she asks if that means there wouldn't be a problem, and as she leaves, she says she's just kidding. Sometime later, she comments that it was brief, but it was fun, and they can come back anytime. He has many questions, but decides he'll ask them all later, and looking to the side, he notices Mira has disappeared. He figures she must be out looking for a house somewhere. After that, he realizes he has the day off and wonders what he should do tonight. Meanwhile, at the chapel, Alfana introduces herself as the founder of the Streamers Support Group. She mentions that creating an environment that allows Lord Streamer to thrive is today's meeting theme. Marita comments that the girl takes this very seriously, and Kana says she enjoys that atmosphere. The priestess thinks that for now, she only needs those who are in the know, and that this identity will bring in more members later. Suddenly, a portal appears in the area. Looking to the side, Alfana wonders who is there and sees something approaching. She understands that she is not at full strength, but for someone to be filtering her spell, it must not be an ordinary person. Suddenly, two people emerge from the portal. One of them asks if they are being tested to see if they are strong enough to protect him, and the other questions if it is an entrance exam. At that moment, everyone looks at the portal to see who it is. In this case, it is the Demon King and the Assassin, who comments that they also want to join. Quickly, they look at each other, realizing that someone was beside them. The princess realizes that the two were at the school the other day. Nikano understands that these two are like them. Smiling, the saint comments that she is excited to meddle with all of them, and that everything is for the Lord Streamer. At that moment, they all make a sort of hand signal together, commenting that everything is for the Lord Streamer. Thus, the alliance is formed. Observing all of this, the goddess thinks that things are getting interesting, and that this is just the second arc of his story soon. And Streamer becomes famous too would be a good title. Meanwhile, the boy is relaxing in the hot springs, saying the time off is wonderful and wondering what everyone else is doing now. At that moment, the gay in the chat asks if he likes pretty girls like the little Saint Princess. That he notices that this made the assassin and the demon king quite annoyed. He responds, saying that if he had to answer with a yes or no, it would be a yes, and if beauty were by his side, he would be a happy man. Crying, he questions if his single accomplices don't agree with him. Under a waterfall, they ask the motto if they heard that right. The two were very happy and embarrassed at the same time, understanding that they are the streamer's type. Before my school, people comment that they heard the little Saint Princess was resting because of a fever, and that they were excited to participate in today's practical lesson with them. In his mind, he understands that it's a bit lonely because he can't even visit her, as he's just a commoner. A teacher enters the scene saying that they will have combat training, which worries several students. He explains that the outfit he asked everyone to wear serves to block any external magic and thus protect any of them from being hurt by spells. However, if the wearer sustains a fatal injury, the emblem on their chest will break, and if it's not enough to block everything, their outfit will not take partial damage, although it will be harmless. In other words, you basically win if you break the other's emblem. Then the teacher asks if anyone wants to volunteer. Suddenly, someone grabs the head of a kid who is trembling, asking him if the two of them can start the first fight, and the boy, crying, says yes. Sometime later, both are battling. In very little time, the boy already gives up. Laughing, the bully says that was very pathetic. The protagonist understands that anyone would feel that way if dragged into a fight against their own will. At this, the bully points at him, saying he is next. Confidently, he tells him to come at him, calling him a commoner. Only the boy understands that, apparently, this bully is taking advantage of Alfana's absence. The teacher tells them not to pay attention to the audience and to begin. At that moment, the bully throws a fire spell toward the protagonist, who disappears in front of him in no time. The bully then questions if that wasn't a fatal injury, and the teacher thinks that it wasn't the outfit that did that. Analyzing, he states that he made a magic wall, recognizing the boy's talent. In his mind, the kid understands that the wall he created was based on knowledge from his past life, and since he didn't have time to test it, he feels anxious. Soon, he thinks he never imagined that his knowledge of magic would be useful in this world. Now being his turn, he also begins to cast a fire spell, and he throws it at the bully, who is very surprised and is quickly hit by it, making his emblem shatter instantly. The teacher then comments that his control is truly incredible, and may even be the best in the class. Meanwhile, the bully is lying on the ground, all beaten up. As he approaches, the man says that the noble student's decade has been standing out and as strong as he is. Not even the teacher can change their opinions. Soon, the young man can rest easy about that, at least. However, the boy says he'll be fine, smiling, and adds that not everyone hates him and that he still has friends. Back in the classroom, he thinks he should eat earlier. Suddenly, the bully approaches with a group of people, and he realizes the other had a spare uniform. The man approaches, telling him to come along with them, and then someone shouts for him to stop right there. They say the saint will be furious, and then Maria comments that he has already lost. However, the bully slaps one of the kids in the face. Yelling, he claims he's not taking the match seriously and asks if he wants proof of that. Awkwardly, the boy thanks them for defending him. He thinks that finally something good has happened and that he should go home right now. However, the bully comes after him, asking why he is running away. He's about to punch him in the face. However, the speed is extremely slow, and suddenly he becomes paralyzed. Canada is in shock, wondering what is happening. Walking around the room, he wonders why everyone is frozen. Looking up at the window, he notices a bird also frozen and understands what's happening. A goddess appears, saying it's rude of inferior human beings, with a mantra which even the ones who use it should consider a sin. However, she says that even being inferior, those who follow him are completely different. Turning around, the protagonist realizes he's heard that voice somewhere before. Suddenly, he comes face to face with his streamer shirt. The goddess then says she needs to do something before they celebrate their first meeting in a long time. Preparing to flick her finger, she says she can't forgive these idiots, and because of that, she's going to eliminate all of them. With a diabolical smile, she says she'll eliminate them one by one. Hearing this, the boy is in shock, but he hears a noise before he can finish his sentence. Smiling, the goddess says this is a bother, so she'll just do everything all at once. Not understanding anything, the boy asks why this is happening. Analyzing the situation, he comments that nothing really happened. He wonders if he misunderstood something. The woman is shocked that he's treating a goddess like a barbaric assassin. Kicking his feet, the boy understands that she's the one who brought him to this world 17 years ago. And she herself says that's exactly what happened. At that, Canada comments that there are many things he'd like to ask, but first he questions what she did earlier. Responding, the goddess tells him not to worry because even if he disappears, they'll be replaced by someone else. And if she likes something, she'll simply erase it and do it again. She explains that even if the world were destroyed, everything would return to normal when she remakes it. Hearing this, the boy is in shock and states that he is completely against that kind of thing, and that this way of thinking is entirely wrong. He says that for him, just stopping time like that makes her a monstrous and terrifying creature, not a goddess. He continues, saying that at least he's never thought of simply getting rid of people he doesn't like. He comments that being loved by everyone is an impossible mission and that even he has haters. He concludes saying that this way of dealing with and interacting with everyone is his humanity and life philosophy. The goddess comments that she already knows this and that it was because of that kind of thing that she tried to approach the noble students. She adds that some of her followers are quite extreme in this situation, which confuses him. Smiling seemingly innocently, she says she now understands that this is the kind of person the boy is. She approaches him, leaving him completely shocked. Hugging him, however, she tells him not to worry. She explains that what she said earlier was hypothetical and that she wanted to confirm how he would react. Pulling away, Canada asks why a goddess like her is wearing those clothes. Responding, she says she made them herself and even put them on her statue in the church. She comments that the streams of the Ez are very interesting to watch and that she's the oldest fan, having been there since the beginning. This leaves him completely surprised, knowing she's a listener. She says that back then, he wasn't that dedicated and even left his listeners alone to go wash his hands. In shock, he wonders what is wrong with this world. The goddess responds that if a goddess like her is strange, then the world itself would also be that way. She pats his shoulder and he says that's not something she should say so confidently. This seems to irritate her quite a bit, apparently. Placing her hand on his shoulder, she comments that this is the first time she's received a comment like that, so she's very surprised. Seeing this, he thinks that both the clothes and goods systems are questionable. He says he looked into it yesterday and found that these shirts were being produced in large quantities, and he'd like it if at least those two. At this moment, the goddess calls the guy Canada. She mentions that today is an exception, but she usually can't interact with him so directly. He explains that staying for too long could completely destroy her balance and concepts. He says he will resume his broadcasts while continuing to watch from above, and that recently, he's been telling this to his friends. Soon, the goddess begins to disappear. She says he's destined to gain more fans than he has now. Watching the woman vanish, the protagonist calls out to the goddess, who says goodbye, saying, "See you later." Suddenly, everything starts to return to normal, and the bully ends up hitting the desk instead of the streamer. In shock, the boy thinks this world is truly insane. Some time passes and he heads back home. He realizes that 3 days have passed since then, and that time goes by very quickly. He recalls how surprising it was when time resumed its normal flow. He saw people writhing in pain, feeling a lot of agony, and apologizing. In this case, the teachers managed to resolve the situation, but that goddess definitely did something. He thinks that he's finally going back to school, so he feels happy despite everything. The boy is curious as to why their attitude toward him changed so suddenly. Before starting the live stream, he says that things have been very strange lately. The goddess is watching his live stream and says she feels that doing this has almost become a duty now, to the point that everything she needs to do in her existence as a goddess and even the world itself seem not to matter at all. She thinks she might prepare a body for the next time she descends to visit him, when suddenly someone calls her by name. Isla asks if she's watching that world again, and the goddess replies that she is, and that's her reason for living. Then she begins to wonder what she should do. She understands that the new one should give up, and that this world is insane since even she rejected it once. She comments that when she talked about erasing things he doesn't like and being able to do so, she was entirely serious. Anyway, when she tried to see if those nobles were alive, she worried that she might have gone too far, so she ended up recreating all of them, but that's a secret. Meanwhile, the demon says she won't allow such a foolish act against the destiny of the human realm. She warns the man that if he wishes, he will die with him. However, this demon man comments that he hasn't lost yet. Suddenly, he sends out a large burst of light and then escapes. Just like that, she runs over to the Demon King, asking if he's alright. Responding, the man warns that the human realm is in danger and that she must summon Lucia immediately. He's wondering if he should visit the goddess again, that his memories from when he was incarnated are confused, so he doesn't know how he'll feel about her. Changing the subject, he asks Maria and the saint why they are so close to him like this. Then Fana comments that this is normal among friends. In his mind, the boy thinks that ever since they returned, the two have been a little too close in every way. He wonders if this is normal. Then both are thinking that they need to make up for the time they weren't with him. At this moment, Maria calls Canada, showing him the prototype of the product she had mentioned before. She explains that it looks good on clothes and also fits nicely on bags. So they made it for both. Staring at the brooch, he asks if this means this outfit will be more well-known, and he comments that he hopes not many imitations appear. Alfana says she doubts there's anyone significant and capable enough to replicate his charisma. Then Maria adds that even if they managed to do it, the real Alfana would notice how fake they are. Awkwardly, he says he's happy to know that both trust him so much. Suddenly, Alfana mentions that she needs to go for an official commitment and will see them tomorrow. At that moment, he says goodbye, including the assassin who appeared out of nowhere. Noticing her presence, he asks what she's doing there. Then Maria tells him to calm down. She explains that this girl is one of the supporters. Then the assassin says she's the fourth one, apparently. Additionally, the princess also explains that a woman from another race has also joined their group. The boy then starts questioning who she's talking about. He congratulates them, saying they did well to welcome her. Then Alfana comments that she didn't expect this from the legendary raven. Smiling, both of them say that, in the end, they are the same. At that moment, he asks why the protection magic isn't working. And the saint explains that Vera has enough power to oppose his mana. Confused, he asks if the assassin is weaker than the priestess, and she explains it's just an exposure, not a nullification. So yes, he understands that the woman's spell works very well at the school, because no one considers her an enemy being a saint. Now he continues to explain that the assassin's mana isn't much above average, and that she's only managing to oppose his mana through her skills. Changing the subject, he asks Mr. Canadet if he knows Maria's family. He responds that he doesn't know them well. Gossiping, he explains that Maria has a little brother and sister. They have bothered her a lot lately because they want to meet her. He comments that he noticed she was more tired lately, but he didn't think it was because of that. And if his sister were friends with someone she admires, she would act the same way. At this moment, the protagonist says he understands and thanks them for the support. Then he says he'll need something to do. He comments that he'll reward her later. This makes the saint very happy. However, in the background, the assassin looks quite sulky. Approaching, she comments on what he's going to do about her. Then he gives her some sweets, and Ataba says she's upset that she'll be going home today. Sometime later in the capital, the demon is watching the protagonist's live stream. A man with a crown then says that, to be honest, he also likes the streamer. But bringing these things to their meetings is a bit strange. In shock, she tells him to think about it with background music. Then the man comments that he's more focused on the streamer's broadcast than on the meeting. Because of this, he can't pay attention. In shock, the woman says a lot has happened, and she's exhausted, and that he can't take this away. The old man then feels happy because the streamer is going to sell his card. The man with the crown then says that it looks like this meeting may last a few days. At this moment, the demon thinks that she needs to participate in this meeting, and that she's counting on Lucia. Meanwhile, back at the protagonist's house, he moves on to the next story. Someone says they recently made a donation to help him, and that he should keep up the hard work. Upon seeing the donation, he remembers he told the two of them to stop doing things behind his back. However, people are talking about the old man in the plaza. This leaves him completely shocked because all the support council members are women. Maria, the saint, and Kana. The old man is in shock, asking what's going on. Scared, the boy understands that it's that scammer, and that he never hired anyone like that during Alive. He realizes they also donated money and apologizes. He says he's going to check a few things and that the broadcast will end here. He warns that he also doesn't accept donations made during streams, and he ignores any suspicious person or anyone who claims to know him. Curious, he wonders what's going on, and that before anything else, he needs more information. Suddenly, the assassin asks if he needs her help. She's hugging herself in the outfit at the window. She says the assassin is providing his security. Then he's in shock, saying she must be terrifying. Taking off her mask, she apologizes and says she can gather some information for him. Immensely, she thinks she'll go after these idiots to the ends of hell if necessary. Meanwhile, back at the meeting, someone says that if these scams keep happening, all countries will be in chaos, and others say they won't even be able to know where they're hiding. The demon then comments that her demons are also specialists in tracking people. She mentions that she will be able to find the responsible party today, but asks if they are willing to help. They both confirm that they are. The man thinks it's the perfect opportunity to check if the demons truly want to maintain a friendly relationship, while the woman is furious, as she won't forgive anyone who used the streamer's name to deceive others, affirming that he will capture Lega, the demon in the way, and restore peace to the human kingdom. Elsewhere, someone remarks that the streamer remains as famous as ever. This is Max, an ordinary citizen from a certain country. The woman comments that doing so little and receiving so much is a blessing. All she did was act as if she knew him, and they didn't even think she was lying. The man reflects that all the time he spent stealing were minor thefts, and now he can get everything back since he can make money, and it's not even a scam. He thinks that if he donates a coin from his bag to him, technically, he'll be using the money to support him. However, he realizes the stream has already ended and says he'll listen to the recording tomorrow. Suddenly, someone starts knocking on the door. Approaching with a coat on, a person asks if he's Max. Then it's revealed to be a woman. He then asks if it's possible for there to be a beauty like her in this country. Quickly, the woman attacks him. He approaches saying that she doesn't even know who he is, but she should have fallen for him when he was away. He wonders if perhaps it was the smile from earlier. Smiling, the girl says he seems excited and asks what he wants to do with her. Going mad, the man begins to laugh, saying he never tires of her sensual voice. The woman then moves closer, calling his name and saying she wants something. In shock, he doesn't understand what she means by that, asking if she wants his mouth, his body, or his love, but she says she wants his heart. Piercing the man's chest with a wicked smile, she asks if he can give it to her. He collapses to the ground, then she comments that he took from the Lord streamer's fans, so in this way he can also be taken. A knight comments that she is very skilled, and the demoness asks if this was different from how a knight would handle it. The man replies that either way, the air is very sweet, and he feels he's losing control. He also asks if she really killed him. The demoness explains that he shouldn't be foolish, and that she merely seduced him, putting him to sleep, meaning he's dreaming that she tore out his heart. Curious, he asks if that's how she bears guilt, and she confirms it is. The man remarks that he thought she would kill since she's a demon. However, she responds that the Lord's streamer preferred a more peaceful resolution. She explains that only the Lord and the others aim to avoid unnecessary conflicts, and that demons are adapting to the Lord streamer's ideas. The knight appears, asking if they found him. Then the man replies affirmatively. At this moment, he thanks the succubi for their help, and she says they'll meet again soon and work together. Powerful demons like these succubi can see others' mana. This way, she could find out who he was if she wanted. However, the fact that she doesn't do so is because she takes pride as his fan. She stays awake, saying she can't wait to meet him in the city someday, and right after that, a man arrives calling for Miss Lucia. Lucia, who has already taken care of the scammer. However, the main plan still relates to that traitorous demon who hasn't been found. Although the Lord Demon's entire army is trying to locate him, he's quite a problematic figure in the end. He investigated why demons can see each other's mana and thus developed a way to hide his own, thus beginning his rebellion. And if they left a few things in the human kingdom, the part started with Miss Shruza, and the Lord Streamer could be completely destroyed. Lucia says that Lega is severely injured and can't fight for long, so it's better to find him soon while he's still in that condition, because Miss Demon King must also be reaching her limit. At this moment, the demon hands over a letter, saying, "Here is a message." The letter is for Lucia, who says that the demon is currently in the meeting and cannot leave the capital. She informs that she can protect the capital alone, and that to capture the scammer, she has listed all the villages, cities, and towns in the kingdom, so she wants Lucia to search there as well. They're leaving everything with the succubi. She tells her not to worry and calls her Majesty. Seeing all this, the Raven thinks that someone apparently got there first. The assassin then explains to the protagonist that this is how the scam was resolved, and that now measures against crimes like this are being strengthened throughout the country. Clenching her fists, she says that next time she'll catch him. Being a personal bodyguard, she'll capture all criminals, bringing them down on his head. Kanana thanks her, saying she was of great help once again. Then he realizes he'll need to inform everyone about this on the live stream tomorrow. Changing the subject, he calls for Mira, asking if she could help him with an experiment while Lucia is around. He explains that he's thinking of evolving his stream to another level. Sometime later, he mentions that he's going to the bathroom, and when he gets back, she should tell him what she thinks. Mira agrees, saying that's fine, and she lies down on his bed. At that moment, she begins to pull the sheet with a manic expression. She comments that she's more of an assassin, but that one was close. She thinks she might have made an ugly face in front of him, that it's very dangerous. The protagonist wonders if it worked, and that he'd be very happy if she liked it. Sometime later, the man with the crown comments that he must be the streamer, and another says it's a pleasure to meet him. He comments that, apparently, ending the meeting was worth it, and that even though he stayed up until 4 a.m. today. At this, the streamer says it's an honor to meet them. At this moment, the two call for their father and mother. Maria tells him not to bother the Lord Streamer too much, and the saint comments that exactly because she's a saint, she can't ignore this. He understands that he just wants to thank Maria and meet her little siblings, but he never imagined the king would also be there. The princess comments that he didn't need to expose himself so much. Then the saint sides with Maria. While he wonders why they need to be so close like this, he whispers that it has its risks, but that a personal meeting is more polite, and they're going to help sell the products and hire people. Seeing this response, Maria says it's incredible. At that moment, the siblings show up, saying they want to talk to the streamer too, that it's unfair. He then asks if they're Maria's siblings, and they introduce themselves as Ars and Fian. The little boy then realizes he embarrassed himself in front of the streamer, because he bit his tongue while saying his name. The protagonist then tells the two kids that they have great names. Meanwhile, Maria and the saint draw the Lord Streamer's attention. The kids then ask if they could do the opening for these streams, and the king tells the two not to be rude. However, he comments that it's fine with his highness, and decides to go for it. He comments that it's time once again. Seeing this, all the girls in the house are very astonished. At that moment, a woman falls into the king's arms. Maria reassures everyone not to worry, that the people in the castle are just a bit anemic. She thinks that everyone's mental strength isn't yet enough to withstand the Lord Streamer, that it looks like it'll take a while for them to join the support group. Quickly, she invites the Lord Streamer to go to the room. Once there, he feels relieved because it was very hot earlier. Where she was, Maria is grateful he took notes, and he says he was just returning a favor. Actually, he comments that the scam situation was very chaotic, and he ended up forgetting something. He mentions that today is the release of those limited items, and that they're exclusive to 3 countries, including theirs. He sends the information to the saint, stating that the launch is on a grand scale, and that apparently the sales lottery attracted many people. The rules weren't enough, so they asked the knights and kings for immunity to ensure a fair lottery, and if the scam situation hadn't been resolved quickly, this would have been delayed as well. The boy thinks that since there are so many problematic fans, he feared there might be a massive uproar. At this moment, he starts hearing many people talking. Then, looking out the window, he understands that it's about to begin. He comments that he didn't even teach them. He thought they should line up. The knight states that if anyone causes trouble, they'll be expelled. Sales in the demon world will begin after Lega is captured. Meanwhile, the assassin is at a small stall, because he got a temporary job recommended by the princess. An announcement begins for the entire audience that the sales have officially started. At that moment, many people celebrate, saying they waited a long time for this moment, and another says they sent 1,000 postcards and won a prize enough for their whole family. Seeing this, everyone starts getting happy, from the women who are fans of the streamer to other people. However, he questions if they really want this, and Maria responds that this is Canada's power. Hiding behind her back, the Saint gets the boy's attention. She says that, apparently last night, he and Mira did something incredible for the first time, then asks if it's true. She explains that when he arrived at the castle with her in the morning, before leaving, Mira was bidding him farewell. And then she told the priest about it with a mischievous look. Seeing this, the girl asks if everything that was said is true. She asks if it was really the first time, and the protagonist replies that it was, and that he shouldn't have asked Mira to keep his secret. The Saint asks if she isn't good enough for him, saying she's given her all for him, that she's practically the same age and height as Maria, and that they have the same strength, actually even stronger than her. But the princess intervenes, asking what happened. Maria then thinks she needs to calm them down. However, Alfana repeats Mira's phrase, which goes, "The sweet sigh he gave me in the room was wonderful." At this moment, the princess changes her mind, approaching, calling him by name and asking him to explain it right now. She then asks if what Mira said about them doing something together last night is true, and the boy responds that it is. At this moment, he wonders why they're both bothered by it. They get very irritated, commenting that he didn't include them. Awkwardly, he says they can do the same with him, then asks if they can forgive him, which shocks them. They're completely surprised by the streamer's response. Maria comments that she doesn't like not being the first, but that it's fine with her. She's okay with trying it just once. Alfana comments that compatibility isn't important. It's not as if Mira is more compatible or something like that. As he leaves, the protagonist says he'll be prepared by then, that they should come to his room tonight. Then Maria asks if they'll do it here. Surrender says no, since all his stuff is back in the dormitory, and that apparently sales are going well too. Some time passes, and Alfana asks them to leave. That Maria comments that she needs to be as clean as possible because they need to be in their best form. The Saint explains that Canada said it would involve tools, but if the assassin Mira couldn't handle it, then can they even stand a chance? Excited, the princess says it's fine because they're taking the initiative, and there's nothing to fear. She concludes they should march together. Arriving at the streamer's dormitory, he laughs and thanks them for the effort they've put in, and that, if it's okay, they should tell the others too, as it would help a lot. After hearing this, both of them blush and agree. The protagonist then tells them to start now. Striking a dramatic pose, he comments that now they're going to start the ASMR experiment. Upon hearing this, both are in shock, asking what he's talking about. Rewinding time, the boy was explaining to Mira that he wanted to make new content as a streamer and was thinking about ASMR. He explains that according to his past life, it stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. In other words, he's going to basically distort this microphone with magic so his voice can send tingling sensations directly to the listener's brains, which leaves her completely surprised. He also says it's a form of pleasure and that a while ago, Maria and Alfana praised his voice, so he thought of trying out. The assassin then comments that he should continue the experiment. The protagonist then comments that he's going to make a stream specifically for the assassin. Looking back, he asks if she could just tell him her terminal identification number. At this moment, he begins speaking with ASMR. He comments that it wasn't the reaction he expected, but the assassin says that even so, it's a great reward for her. He then decides to modify his voice even more, which leaves her stunned. He's happy to see that it worked. Back in the present, Alfana questions what this means for the experiment. Alfana comments that it's as if his voice directly reaches her brain. Then Maria comments that if she hears anything else, she'll go mad. Hearing this, the boy just smiles. In the ASMR, he apologizes for it, and that he's only supporting data and that she has to hold on a little longer. After the experiment, he thinks he doesn't know much about ASMR, but things like food, whispers, and sweets were popular back then, and he started developing this to make everyone happy. But in terms of reactions, it's very good. In the flashback, he goes to Mira and asks if she'd like to say something to him. Then the girl asks if it can be anything. Smiling, he comments that he appreciates her help earlier and tells her to continue the experiment. The assassin then writes a letter and hands over the script that Mira wrote for him. He also repeats it to Maria and Alfana, saying that from now on, they should live only for him. The boy is shocked because the assassin was truly motivated by his words and asks how it went. She responds that it's appealing as a form of pleasure, but thinks it's best saved for the future, as there are definitely things to improve. Both Maria and Alfana comment that they will work on it with him for a long-term project, saying he'll need a lot more data. Smiling, the protagonist thanks them, agreeing that they're right. In this case, for the girls, they kept their expressions in check and focus all their efforts on containing their voices. The ASMR streams are still far from being complete. In a small school plaza, Maria asks Alfana if anyone is nearby. The girl replies that she's at her limit and can't put up any more barriers, collapsing to the ground. The princess questions whether releasing ASMR to the world is truly the right thing, and her friend comments that it's both terrifying and wonderful, so they should monopolize it. Back in Canada's room, he looks at a product and says it sold well. Since it sold so much, he should use some of that money for his parents. Just enough so it doesn't look suspicious and not too late, at least. However, disaster is about to strike Canada's homeland. Because in a few days in that very hometown, a demon will attack everyone. An angel calls out to her goddess. Isla comments that she's wearing a complex expression as usual. The question is whether it's just an ordinary village in the countryside. And the goddess responds that this is Canada's hometown called Ralgan. It's about to be destroyed. And the goddess says she's sorry, that she doesn't think she can interfere, and it's painful. But Isla thinks she wants to do something for humanity. A woman, tired from working in the field, comments that it should be enough for now. Then she notices someone approaching, greeting Miss Mesa. It's the traveler named Lega. The woman asks how his injuries are. The boy replies that he feels they should be healed by tonight, as a few days ago he was nearly dead, which was embarrassing. He says he was desperately trying to escape some bandits but feels happy now since he met them. The woman comments that every time she sees him, she's reminded of her only son. She explains that his name is Canada, and he's about the same age, and she worries if he's doing well at school. The boy assures her that he's probably fine. The protagonist's father appears, calling her to join him for lunch. At that moment, she bids farewell to the demon, who thanks her for her concern. However, this is all an act and he's deeply irritated, saying that all these people are worthless. He thinks this is all a fault of that demon king and he's stuck recovering in this disgusting place because of her. But tonight his mana will be fully restored. In that case, he'll start by eating, destroying, and killing everyone here. Suddenly, he sees a mysterious person and claims that they don't have enough mana to be a snack and are just a filthy person. Sometime later, the family gathers to eat and celebrate the boy's recovery. However, he tells the old man to be quiet and says humans truly are fools, transforming and saying they're a joke. Revealing his true form, he declares they're idiots and will be his dinner tonight. Looking around, he wonders who he'll start with. Then he sees an old man kneeling on the ground, questioning what he's doing and tells him he should hurry and run now. The protagonist's mother appears, declaring she'll buy them some time, and that they should go to their parents. The demon asks what she's planning to do, and how many seconds she thinks she'll gain. However, the protagonist's father suddenly attacks him from behind, telling him not to lay a hand on his wife. He quickly attacks him, telling him to fall to his death right now, and calling him weak. The demon then speaks to the woman, saying she associated him with her son, and asks if she's not happy to be reminded of him as she dies, like a useless person approaching death. The woman apologizes to Canada, her son, but just in time someone arrives at the scene, blocking the attack and stating that this list was indeed accurate. The demon realizes this was the mysterious person he saw by the tree earlier in the day. Then she reveals herself to be a succubus. The demon then questions how she arrived without him sensing her presence, and someone else appears, affirming that Lucia is excellent. This is the demon queen, who says that Lucia copied her ability to easily conceal herself among humans. Then the queen senses his presence and says she'll take over for the previous declaration to that woman. At this moment, she begins to grow extremely irritated. She questions if he truly attempted to kill Canada's parents. Charging at him, she declares that this is unforgivable and that she'll kill him now. The goddess comments that things are still developing. Meanwhile, the succubus remarks that now it's Lega's defeat. Canada's mother, however, thinks that both of them are evil. Yet, the traitorous demon Lega manages to find an opening, and he lands a full-force punch on his mistress. At this moment, she's suddenly sucked in. A portal simply appears. The succubus explains that her specialties are illusions, and that the thing he consumed was a spatial vortex. The demon queen then praises her, saying she'll leave the rest to her. After being transported, he wonders where he is. The queen says this is a place far from the capital and from Rugen, as well as his tomb. She explains that he can still connect the outside world to the demon realm, but not here. Approaching, ready to deliver a kick. The demon remarks that she's different from before, and she realizes his mana is 10 times greater than before. But she ends up countering, landing a full-force punch on his stomach. She comments that her power is about 1,000 times her usual strength. A single punch is strong enough to throw him far back and shatter a rock. Lying on the ground, the demon man mutters that this can't be real. Smiling, the demon queen affirms that this is her strength for humanity, because demons are prepared to laugh with humans, support them, and have fun together. Unfortunately, the defeated demon never recognized the kindness of these beings after encountering and interacting with them. However, the man says that no matter what she says, he will never accept this idea. Explaining further, she says that he must think humans are appealing for them to want to marry demons. This unexpected answer leaves the demon deeply surprised. The queen continues, saying that when she makes the world accept her kingdom and make marriage with humans possible, in that way she will be rewarded with a child from the streamer. Absolutely. After hearing all of this, the demon declares that she's insane. Launching an attack, she asks if he doesn't remember the pleasure of killing humans and remarks that demons have felt this for hundreds of years. As the lightning approaches, the demon queen says they are remnants of an ancient era. At this moment, she commands her cape to return to wings and protect her, which it does. Quickly, the demoness approaches the man, preparing to punch, and says this is for the wrath of the victims to whom she offers her fist. Landing a solid punch on the man's face, she declares that this is also for Canada and the villagers who suffered greatly from the destruction of their homes and the entire village. She says it's the streamer who wishes for all the peace, who is the streamer, who has to postpone their engagement, and it's also delaying the birth of their eldest son, eldest daughter, second son, and many more. After defeating the demon, he is left completely shocked and broken. Throwing him up, she says she's going to introduce a little something now. At this moment, she places him inside a black sphere, immobilizing him completely. Snapping her fingers, she says the boy is definitely her husband and that this traitorous demon should ponder over it in hell. At this moment, the demon declares that she's never dated anyone before, and after realizing this, he simply explodes. Afterward, the queen returns to the previous location. The succubus informs her that they're progressing with repairs to the village, and the queen then says she's leaving this place. However, her subordinate asks if she was injured in battle in any way, but her leader explains that she defeated that demon, yet she still hasn't slept since the meeting, and that her body won't last. At this point, her subordinate asks if Her Majesty is going to sleep for 5 days. Sometime later, she awakens, asking where she is, and Canada's mother catches her attention, asking if she's already awake. The woman then thanks her for what she did and introduces herself as Meza, Canada's mother. She says it's a surprise that her brave son is friends with the Lord of Demons. Truza is extremely surprised after hearing this and questions how this human woman knows the whole story. At this, the succubus explains that she told the protagonist's mother about the situation, believing it was necessary due to recent events. Approaching, she thanks the demon queen and explains that she's happy to know the current Lord of Demons is kind to humans. She also apologizes for not having an extra guest bed, explaining that she had to place her in Canada's bed. The queen, slightly embarrassed, thanks her, and looking to the side, she notices the hero's clothes. Walking over, she wonders what they are, with the woman responding that her son had a costume for the school festival and didn't have a place to store it, so she left it there. At that moment, the subordinate approaches her queen. The succubus comments that it's true. Lord Canada really is the Lord Streamer. She asks if any demons have noticed, and the queen replies that fortunately, they're not even aware of live streaming. Lucy then casts an illusion on the costume. With this, only those involved with the streamer can see it. The queen then comments that they are probably the only ones who know about it and must keep it a secret. Snapping her fingers, she remarks that she couldn't ask for a better situation. Looking forward, the woman asks if there weren't clothes there before. They respond that probably there weren't. Changing the subject, she compliments the two demons' hair and comments that her husband also has black hair, which is wonderful for them. She says that her husband once mentioned that if she ever goes out with someone, it should be someone with black hair for their son, quite some time ago. The demons just smile in a rather eerie way, and the queen tells her not to forget those words. Thus, the two demons and Yander doubt whether all those words came from humans who were unaware of their intentions. The demons say they'll spread the word of the streamer here, keeping their identities a secret. Shifting slightly to the previous night, the protagonist is walking through the city when suddenly, he looks up and says he feels like something is lighting up the sky. While his hometown was saved, something he doesn't know, he is away from the capital, in Randall. On another day, the protagonist asks someone if they'd like to go on a trip to Randall together. The princess apologizes for mentioning it so late, but Alphonso says he doesn't care much about social status. Smiling, she gently asks everyone to go together tomorrow, so Canada and the others depart in an instant. Upon arriving in the city, Maria tells the protagonist that this country manufactures magical items and some of them might be useful for streaming. The boy asks if Alphonso will come, and Maria responds that she's a saint of the capital, so things have only been complicated. Taking his hand, she comments that's why she hasn't left the country much and that they should change that. In the background, someone comments that this is very romantic. Looking back, the princess calls the girl by name Athena, who replies that it was just a joke. She greets the students and introduces herself as Athena Peritho, the Duke's daughter. The boys bow and say it's a pleasure to meet her, but the woman tells them to lift their heads. After all, they are special guests. She apologizes to Maria for the early disturbance, but informs her that the meeting will start soon. In front of the mansion, someone mentions it's time to start studying. The princess asks Athena if their proposal can join the meeting, and the woman replies that it cannot. One of the students calls the protagonist, asking if he's decided what he'll study, and Canada replies that he's decided to study magical items today. They comment that it's different from what they chose, and that they would have invited him if it weren't. After the boys leave, the protagonist thinks this is what they call youth, it seems. Later, in another place, walking through the street, the protagonist thinks that strolling in a foreign country is great, but he questions if this is really the craftsman's district. Sitting on a bench, he comments that he's been walking for half an hour, and that he's tired and should rest a bit. Looking to the side, he overhears a conversation and thinks it's a couple. However, he realizes it's just a girl and not two people. Suddenly, he looks closely and notices something very strange. Analyzing the doll, he remarks that its lips are very soft and calls it Mr. Streamer, with a rather creepy expression. At this moment, Canada discovers the terrifying existence of Yander listeners. Seeing this, he wonders if that's not a doll himself. Awkwardly, the girl apologizes to him, saying that playing with dolls is her hobby and admits she knew she was noisy. Approaching, she asks if he's a fan, noticing the button on his clothing. He responds that the streamer is the best. At this moment, the Yander asks if he's a student from the capital, and he confirms that he is. With a crazed look, she questions how the princess and the saint know the streamer and if there's anything in the newspapers about this. Biting her fingers, she reveals that she's already dying of jealousy and that, after all, everything is happening according to the streamer's will. Completely confused, the protagonist wonders what's wrong with this girl because she's beautiful but just as scary as Mira. He asks why she's so interested in this topic. With teary eyes, the mysterious girl replies that it's because his words saved her whole life. Then she comments that he must be curious, so she'll tell the story. But before she can start, he interrupts her, asking where the craftsman's district is. She says that if that's the case, she can accompany him while telling her story. As they walk together, he's not paying the slightest attention to her tale. Thinking there are crazy fans in this world too, he wonders if she's the only fan who's this obsessed at this level. Sometime later, he thanks her for her help, and she thanks him in return for being her conversation companion. Then she remembers something. She introduces herself, saying her name is Lisa, a completely ordinary peasant, and he tells her his name is Canada. He says she's very beautiful and even thought she might be a noble. She replies that even if she were, social status means nothing at all, because that's what Mr. Streamer said. As they say goodbye, she tells him she's leaving, and that they'll talk about Mr. Streamer again someday. Smiling and bidding her farewell, the boy replies, of course, but in his mind he's already sure he'll never talk about it with her again. He watches some children playing and remarks that just watching them is already enjoyable. However, he notices as he walks that Randall seems to have a significant issue with social discrimination too, and that it's unfortunate because being a commoner doesn't mean one's skills are inferior. At that moment, he hears someone shouting, "Terrible store." The man is yelling, saying that everything is trash, and the woman warns him that if that's all, he can leave. Approaching, the boy tells him not to speak like that to someone who puts so much dedication into their work. Pushing him back, he asserts that this trash was made with more care and dedication than he could imagine in his world. Afterwards, something falls into his hand. Examining it, he realizes it's a flash drive. He wonders why people would see this as trash, as he finds it amazing. Then the bully calls out to the brat. The man asks what he would do if he broke his bones. However, calmly looking at the boy, he realizes he's a kid from the capital, so he's in shock. He runs away saying he has work to do and won't come back, asking for forgiveness. At this moment, the shopkeeper thanks the boy. The merchant says it was incredible how he made the man run. Then he asks for his name, and the boy replies that his name is Canada and that he's from the capital. A boy with glasses introduces himself as Shidu and says he's the owner of this shop and also a craftsman. Canada and Shidu's encounter marks the beginning of an unexpected tale, and this very meeting gives rise to a duo that would turn the world upside down. But that's a story for much later in the future. Sometime later, the boy with glasses asks why he came here, being from the capital, and offers him tea, commenting that he must be tired. Canada thanks Shigo, but Shidu says there's no need to be so formal as they're the same age. He says 2 customers in one day is rare for him, and that most people aren't interested in his creations. He says he barely makes ends meet working for the nobles. He explains that being a commoner, he only receives 30% of the standard salary and can't survive here without fame or connections. Surprised, the boy understands that the merchant's situation is even tougher than his own, despite both being commoners. Then the boy with glasses says that even so, he still has a dream. He affirms that he wants the things he creates to make people happy, regardless of social class, and that discrimination happens because people aren't open-minded. They keep creating things that don't fit anything. He declares that he doesn't have money or talent, but he has passion, and then he shows a box. In shock, the protagonist realizes it's a pair of headphones. He then asks if the boy really made that himself. He replies that actually he got the idea from the streamer, which leaves the merchant rather confused. The merchant explains that he usually plays it as background sound, but apparently the streamer's voice is quite famous, and some people listen just for that. He says he thought it would be better to hear him directly in his ears rather than through a speaker. However, he doesn't have a compatible device, neither by magic nor technology. There's a bit of noise, but the quality is good. But looking back, he notices Canada is already using headphones. Responding, Canada says it was instinct. Approaching, he puts one of the headphones on Shidu, and Shidu hears the sound of water or a flowing river. Excited, he says he's getting closer and closer to his dream. Canada then asks Shidu if he can buy 6 pairs of these headphones. Shidu asks if 6 gold coins will be enough. Then Shidu recalls something. He mentions that, if he remembers correctly, the streamer used this background music yesterday. Changing the subject, he tosses something to Canada, saying these are the new products, the headphones he purchased. He explains that they admire the streamer to the point of recording and editing his streams, and that love has no gender. At that moment, Canada says goodbye, mentioning it's time for him to go, but the merchant stops him, commenting that what Canada said truly helped. Approaching, Shigo expresses that it really made him happy, thanking him. His gratitude was directed at Canada and not the streamer, and that's how he made his first friend of the same gender. Returning to the present, Canada wonders what that is in the sky. Inside the mansion, everyone thanks Miss Athena for the meal. Amazed by the food, Canada states he's never had such a delicious meal before. Smiling, Athena says he doesn't need to thank her and should instead thank Princess Maria. At this, Canada says he's genuinely grateful to Princess Maria. for the way she cares and thinks about others, regardless of class. It really shows how much she cares about them as friends. Hearing this, the princess is shocked, while Athena finds the boy's statement very interesting. Changing the subject, Athena tells Maria that there's someone she'd like to introduce to her. She explains that this is her friend Lisa, who's a fan of the streamer, which leaves the protagonist completely stunned, not believing that this is actually happening. Looking more closely at Athena's outfit, the boy also realizes that she's a fan of the streamer, just like the other girl. Athena then tells Maria that since she's one of the rare people who know the streamer, she'd like her to chat with Lisa about all sorts of things. While they take a bath, of course. The princess agrees as long as it's done moderately. Meanwhile, the protagonist is in the male dormitory. He thinks that Maria and the others are getting along well and having girl talk in the bath because of him. He soon starts to imagine the whole scene of the three of them together. Interrupting his imagination, his roommates call him over. One of them apologizes for everything and explains that they're in the same class but barely talk, and they never helped him when he was in trouble. The protagonist says he doesn't mind, and actually he should be the one thanking them. The boys comment that they're all commoners, and seeing him work hard also motivates them. Then the one with glasses says he hopes they can be friends from now on, and smiling, Canada thanks them and suggests a celebration. He asks if they know what a pillow fight is. Canada was slowly becoming loved by those around him. However, in any case, he couldn't lower his guard, for not all love is pure. In the bath, Maria calls out to Athena, urging her to get in already. Athena responds with a sadistic smile, saying she's on her way. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tab's channel.